Serafina's POV. Tears burned my eyes. Alina? I gasped. I hadn't realized it until there was a difference, but I'd been listening to her as if through a vacuum. Her voice had been muted, and because I'd never heard it any other way, I didn't even know. But now, she was bright, vivid, full of untamed energy I never knew I possessed. I pressed a trembling hand against my chest, heart pounding wildly as raw emotion surged inside, threatening to break me open. "Are you all right?" Lucian's concern threaded through his low voice. I blinked rapidly, the edges of the world refocusing around him. The moonlight still glistened on his dark hair, droplets of water sliding down his torso. I smiled weakly, tears blurring my vision again. "I'm all right. More than all right, I was fucking fantastic." "Don't cry, Sarah," Alina purred. "It ruins your dramatic moment." A breathless laugh escaped me, half disbelief, half joy. Lucian tilted his head slightly. "Sarah, what's so funny?" "Nothing," I said quickly, biting back another laugh. "She's just—" I stopped myself, remembering that Lucian didn't know the truth about Alina. "Sorry," I exhaled. "I'm just a little overwhelmed." "How do you feel, Alina?" I asked internally. Alina spoke again, her tone shifting. "It's strange," she murmured. "I feel stronger. Not whole yet, but close. Like I can feel my soul being stitched back together." My heart leapt. "Can you shift?" She paused thoughtfully. "Not yet, but we can try something." I frowned. "Try what?" I felt her answer in the form of tiny pinpricks of electricity running up and down my arms. I glanced down and froze. The skin on my fingers tingled, then rippled. My nails elongated, sharpening into curved pale claws that glinted under the moonlight. The faint outline of silver hair traced my wrists and the back of my hands, except it was fur. A startled gasp escaped me. "Lucian, look!" His eyes widened as I lifted my hands, trembling with disbelief. "Your claws," he breathed. "That's impossible," I finished for him, incredulous laughter bubbling out of me. "We can do more together now," Alina said, her joy rippling through me and merging as my own. Lucian's expression softened into pride, the corners of his mouth lifting. "This is amazing, Sarah. It's a sign that your bond with your wolf is healing." Hearing it aloud shattered what little composure I had left. Gratitude flooded through me faster than thought, and before I could stop myself, I threw my arms around his neck. "Thank you," I whispered, my lips brushing his shoulder. He stiffened, just slightly, then relaxed. His arms came around me, slow and careful, steadying me. I felt the strength in him, not overwhelming, but sure. Safe, and then the blanket around me slipped from my shoulders, falling soundlessly to the grass. I felt his breath catch at the same time mine did. My heart stuttered as the warmth of Lucian's body pressed against mine, our torsos aligned, skin to skin. I could feel his heartbeat, strong, erratic, beneath the rise and fall of his bare chest. His scent hit me all at once, dizzying and too intimate. Every inch of me felt too aware of him, of the space we shared, of the impossible closeness that sent a shiver racing down my spine. And then I felt it, the unmistakable proof of his arousal through his wet pants. I pulled back so quickly my heels nearly slipped on the damp ground. I caught myself in time and quickly dropped to the ground to pick up the fallen blanket. I clutched it around myself like a shield. "I'm so sorry," I sputtered, heat flooding my face. "I didn't mean." "You don't need to apologize." Lucian's voice was rough around the edges, his gaze fixed politely over my shoulder. "It's all right." But it wasn't. The awkwardness that hadn't slipped in when I first shrugged off the robe now slammed into both of us. His jaw tightened, restraint flickering through his eyes as he turned away and not so subtly adjusted his pants. "Ah, fuck. It's not." He turned back then, lips twitching like he was struggling to keep his smile in place. "Sarah." I shut my mouth. He exhaled, slow and unsteady. "You're fine." "You are not fine," Alina drawled in my head, tone bubbling with mischief. "But he is. Spirits above, that man's built like a statue. I wouldn't mind if you got a piece of—" My eyes widened. "Alina, what?" "I'm just commenting. Appreciating good craftsmanship. I know I just got here, but I also know it's been a long time since you've had a good, proper "Shut up!" I hissed internally. My cheeks were so hot you could fry an egg on them. "Just saying." I could practically feel her smirking. "It wouldn't be so bad to not go to bed alone tonight." Gods above, I had Maya 2-0 living in my head. Lucian tilted his head slightly. "Something wrong?" "Nope," I said too quickly. "Absolutely nothing. He chuckled under his breath, the sound soft but maddeningly amused. It cooled the burning in my chest a little, dissipated the last bits of awkwardness hanging between us. Come on. He held his hand out. Let's get back in before we catch something more than the moon's blessing. I laughed softly, but it died when I stretched my hand out and saw that it was back to normal. Lucian noticed and covered my hand with his. You may not be where you want to be, he said, his voice filled with conviction, but you're nowhere near where you started. Took the words right out of my mouth, Alina said. I smiled and let him lead me out of the valley, the world shifting around us as the weight of the moment lifted, making each step toward the pack house feel new. By the time we returned, my legs still felt weak, not from exhaustion, but from the sheer gravity of everything that had just happened. Alina kept humming in the back of my mind like she couldn't quite contain her joy. Her energy was overflowing. It cascaded through me, pulsing and alive. I simultaneously felt like I could collapse from the force of it, and like I could run the entire perimeter of Shadowvale. Lucian walked me to the door of the guest room I was occupying in the Alpha Wing. You should rest, he said. The ritual took a toll on your body. I'll send someone up with dinner. I'm fine, I said automatically, but my voice wavered. He gave me a knowing look that said he saw right through me. I already know you're strong, Sarah. His voice softened. I hope you know you can be vulnerable with me. My lips parted, but the words lodged in my throat. I stared down at my hands, still unable to believe that they'd sprouted actual fucking claws. It felt unreal, like a dream, and it never would have been possible without Lucian. He saved my life and brought me into OTS, where I learned to be strong. And then he'd done this for me, invited me into his pack, his home, let the moon bless me, bringing me closer to my wolf than ever. Gratitude washed over me. Then, just as quickly, a fierce tide of guilt threatened to swallow it. I'd been upset that Lucian kept the truth about Zara from me, but there were so many things about myself I'd kept hidden from him. It's okay, Alina said. You can do it. I held my breath. Are you sure? He did this for us, she replied. The least you could do is let him know I exist. I exhaled slowly. Lucian, there's something I need to tell you. He arched a brow, taking in my sudden somberness. Is everything okay? I shrugged, pulling the blanket tighter around me. I hope so. He studied me for a moment, as if he could read the words on my face. Then he nodded. Okay, but first, get changed into something warm, and let's sit by the fire. I'll never forgive myself if you visit my pack and leave with a cold. I smiled softly. Okay. 10 minutes later, I was wearing a cozy sweater and curled up on the couch in Lucian's private living room, nursing a mug of the herbal tea as I watched him stoke the fire. When he was satisfied, he moved back. The couch dipped as he lowered his weight beside me. The warmth from the hearth was a comforting embrace, and for a moment we sat in soothing silence. I knew he was waiting for me to speak, respecting my pace, but my tongue tangled as I tried to figure out how to string the words together. In the end, I just blurted, I have my wolf. Her name is Alina. She woke up in the snowfield arena. Lucian stilled, his expression stunned for a moment. I exhaled, setting the mug down on the side table. So yeah, and then his face broke into a genuine smile. That's incredible, Sarah, I blinked. You're not mad? His brows knit. Why would I be? Because I got mad that you kept something from me, but I did the same. He chuckled softly, shaking his head. I'm too happy for you to feel any other emotion. The warmth in his tone felt like sunlight. For a moment, I let myself bask in it. Before the gravity of the rest of my truth settled around me, I swallowed hard. Hold on to that feeling, because there's something else. Lucian's expression grew cautious. I'm listening. I drew a breath. Kieran and I might be mates. Silence. The words hung in the air like an anvil dangling from a fragile thread. Lucian's jaw tensed, but his eyes never left mine. Your wolf, Alina, told you that? I shook my head slowly. Actually, Kieran did. At least he thinks so. There's a feeling. I hated that word. And do you believe him? Lucian asked softly. Alina isn't sure. She isn't strong enough to sense the bond yet. I dropped my head. I don't know what I believe. His chin dipped. Right. He didn't move, didn't speak. When I lifted my gaze to him again, his eyes were shadowed, calm, but with something indecipherable beneath. The quiet stretched until I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. are. His throat worked, a tightness stretching around his mouth. Are you telling me this because you plan to get back together with him? The question hit like a stone to the chest. What? No. I shook my head quickly. No, Lucian, that's not what this is. A deep, vertical line formed between his brows. Then what is it? I took a steadying breath. It's me being honest. It wasn't fair for me to punish you for your secrets when I had my own. His expression softened, though the flicker of uncertainty remained. And how do you feel about him? Kieran Blackthorne can take a long walk off a short plank, Alina mumbled. My brief spark of amusement was tempered by the seriousness of the conversation. I was silent for a while, trying to choose my words carefully. Talking about my relationship with Kieran was like trying to untangle a severely knotted chain. Each time I loosened one tangle, another tightened somewhere else. I don't hate him anymore, I said, only realizing in that moment that I meant it. But I don't love him either. Sometimes I can feel the pull. The yacht, the island, the car wreck. I couldn't bring myself to go into detail. I sighed. But until I can fully shift, I won't know the truth about me and Kieran. Lucian nodded. But even then I rushed to add, I have no intention of anything changing between us. Plus, Alina's not too crazy about him. And me, he pressed gently. I smiled softly. Alina likes you. His eyes widened slightly. Really? I nodded. She always has. Hope lit up his eyes, and it pained me to say my next words. But until I get full clarity, until everything doesn't feel like a tangled mess, I don't think I'm ready for another bond. My chest tightened when the light in his eyes dimmed, but he nodded slowly. I understand. I like what we have now, I said, the words trembling but honest. I want to keep it this way for a while. Lucian's lips curved into the faintest smile. I can respect that. Your heart is a treasure, Sarah. You shouldn't give it out lightly. I mirrored his smile. Thank you. He hesitated, then shifted closer on the couch. Before I could react, he drew me into a gentle embrace. And when you're ready, he murmured near my ear, whatever you decide, whoever you choose, even if you don't choose anyone at all, I'll support you. I swallowed hard, clutching the fabric of his shirt. Thank you. Always. Lucian's Povee. Sarah's scent lingered long after she left, lavender threaded with something softer that was uniquely hers. The silence pressed in, thick and reflective, as I sat by the fireplace, staring into the flames that had begun to burn low. She'd told me the truth, about her wolf, about Kieran. And though everything in me twisted at the mention of his name, at the revelation of their bond, I appreciated her honesty. I could only hope that when she said she had no intention of going back to her ex-husband, she meant it. With a heavy sigh, I rose and doused the fire. The faint hiss of water meeting ember echoed in the quiet. Then I turned and headed down the corridor toward my quarters. The moonlight filtered through the tall windows, painting silver patterns on the stone floor. Soft laughter floated in from outside, but in here, the night felt too still, like it was holding its breath. Inside my room, I shed my shirt and tossed it aside. Cool air washed over me as I stood by the large floor-to-ceiling window. From here, I could see the valley that housed the moonlit spring. I could still picture Sarah stepping in, her head thrown back as the moon bathed her in its luminescence. She'd never looked more beautiful in that moment. And when she hugged me, I shook my head, instantly banishing the carnal thought. And that was when I heard him. You're troubled. The voice was deep, resonant, threaded with a calm I hadn't felt in years. I was stunned for half a heartbeat before my pulse kicked. Regan? It had been months, no years since my wolf had spoken clearly. There'd been the occasional whisper, an instinct here or there, heightened whenever I shifted, but nothing like this. Hearing him again felt like having an old friend suddenly return after years of war. Is that really you? I asked, rubbing a hand over my jaw. Do you have more than one voice in your head? I exhaled an incredulous laugh. I thought you'd gone silent for good. I was watching, Regan replied, his tone warm. And waiting. You needed space to grieve. We both did. I lowered myself into the chair by the window. You know, I could have used your help. Grieving was a lot harder when you abandoned me. I didn't abandon you, he said simply. I never could. But remember, you weren't the only one who lost a mate. I swallowed hard, my gaze drifting outside to the moonlit spring. That I was hearing Regan's voice loud and clear after all this time. Had I also been blessed by the spring tonight? How are you? I asked softly. A moment of silence passed before he answered. Half a soul is still a soul. A melancholic smile crept onto my lips, and then he caught me off guard. She's quite something, Alina. I felt his amusement at my surprise. I sensed her long before you did. I let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. You could have told me, you know. It was not my news to share. I rolled my eyes. And what do you think of her? She's strong, fierce, he said, admiration thick in his voice. When she fully emerges, she will be a force to reckon with. Surprise rippled through me. You like her. I do. That was unexpected. Even before Zara, Regan rarely acknowledged female wolves. And since Zara's death, silence. You haven't said that about anyone in years. None were worth saying it about, he said without hesitation. This one is different. If I disliked her, do you think your connection with her would have unfolded this smoothly? You would have felt resistance. Conflict. I leaned back, frowning slightly. I wouldn't necessarily call my connection with Sarah smooth. So what? You've been quietly approving from the shadows? Observing, he corrected, and waiting for you to realize your heart was trying to wake long before your mind let it. His words hit too close. I closed my eyes, pressing my thumb and forefinger against them. I haven't been denying my heart. I love Sarah. But you haven't fully given yourself over either, and I understand why. But Lucian, his tone softened. You cannot keep punishing yourself by caging every emotion that isn't grief. Zara wouldn't have wanted that, nor Arden. The sound of her name, their names, in his voice was both balm and blade. Grief surged beneath the comfort, sharp and tender, leaving my heart raw. I clenched my jaw and stared down at my hands. Old scars caught the moonlight, reminders of battles fought both outside and within. You think I should just forget about them? Not forget, Regan murmured. You should live again, feel again. You honoring her doesn't mean you have to wither beside her memory. My throat tightened. You want me to let her go? I felt her last thoughts, he said softly. Arden's too. Neither of them wished for you to spend the rest of your life trapped with ghosts. They wanted you free. For a long moment, I said nothing. The silence stretched, heavy and fragile. I sighed, dragging a hand down my face. I forgot how clear-sighted you could be. Wolves see truth without complication, he replied simply. You humans like to twist it into whatever shapes hurt less. A humorless smile tugged at my lips. Maybe, but I have no idea how to twist the news about Sarah and Kieran. He hummed quietly, a low rumble of understanding. Then softer. You fear the bond between them. I grimaced. Can you blame me? You know exactly what it feels like. I couldn't fathom even looking at another female if Zara were still alive. So tell me, will you back down because of it? That question was sharp, piercing. I sat up straighter. Back down? I echoed. You know that's not me. A deep, approving rumble vibrated through our link. Good, because fate is only one thread in the tapestry. The rest you weave with your own hands. That made me laugh, low and rough. You've gotten philosophical in your silence. Maybe I had time to think, put things into perspective. Or maybe you've been waiting to lecture me. Also that. I couldn't help the small smile tugging at my mouth. It's good to have you back, Regan. You never lost me, he said quietly, but it's good to be back. I don't remember falling asleep, but at some point fatigue must have crept in and dragged me under, because I was dreaming. And there she was, Zara. She sat by the moonlit spring, the water glowing faintly under the moon's touch. The light cast her fair hair in silver, and her eyes, those sharp, steady eyes, softened when they found mine. For a heartbeat, my lungs forgot how to work. My whole body locked up, grief and longing erupting at the sight of her. Zara. My voice cracked on her name. She smiled faintly. Hello, look. I moved toward her before I even realized it, feet sinking into the soft moss by the water's edge. You're here. In a way, she said. Her tone carried a familiar serenity, the one that used to drive me mad because it meant she'd already made peace with something I hadn't. A lump formed in my throat. I never thought I'd see you again. I know. Her gaze softened further. You weren't supposed to, but I couldn't leave without saying goodbye. I froze. Goodbye? She nodded, her smile tinged with something like relief. You've carried me with you long enough, too long. It's time to let go. I felt my breath catch, panic clawing its way up. Zara, no. She held up a hand, the gesture gentle but firm. Look, you've done enough. You've kept your promise, led the pack, built our dream. But this guilt, this self-punishment, it's not love anymore. Her expression was tender. It's a cage. The world seemed to still, the soft ripple of the spring, the whisper of the wind through the trees. I don't want to lose you again, I said quietly, my voice trembling. You won't, she said simply. You'll carry me in the ways that matter, but I'm not meant to stay as your shadow. She shifted slightly, gesturing for me to sit beside her. I obeyed, lowering myself to the moss. Her scent surrounded us, familiar and bittersweet. Tell me, she said, what have you seen since I've been gone? The question startled me. What? Her smile deepened. Tell me what you've built, what you've become, what you've seen worth living for. You already know. She nudged me gently. I want to hear you say it. I hesitated, but something about her calm steadiness pulled the words free. I spoke of Shadowvale, how we'd rebuilt after the attacks, how the pack had grown stronger. I told her about OTS, all the broken and lost wolves we'd helped. And finally I spoke of Sarah. Zara listened, her head tilted slightly, eyes bright with curiosity. She's different, I said softly, fierce and gentle at the same time. She brings light where she goes, even when she doesn't realize it. Zara smiled knowingly. She reminds you of life. You, I wanted to say. She reminds me of you. Zara turned her gaze toward the spring where moonlight turned the surface to liquid silver. She's a good woman. She will make a phenomenal Luna. You sound like you know her, I said, a faint, trembling smile pulling at my lips. In a way, Zara murmured. We share a bloodline, after all. She smiled fondly. I guess you have a weakness for women with fire in their veins. That drew a shaky laugh from me. You make it sound like a flaw. It's not. She reached out and intertwined our fingers. My heart stuttered painfully at the contact. Look, listen to me. I did. Every muscle in me stilled. You can't stay where I am, she said gently. And I don't want you to. Promise me you'll keep moving forward. Whether it's with her or not, promise me you'll live. My throat was raw. Zara, she reached out with her other hand, her fingers brushing my cheek. They were warm, her touch so real it hurt. You don't owe me your loneliness. I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, that I owed her everything, that I'd spent years trying to make peace with her absence, with my guilt, and failed. But her expression left no room for protest. You'll protect her, she said softly, not because she's like me, but because she's her own soul, and because protecting her will help you heal too. A quiet sob threatened to escape me. I forced it down, jaw tight. You really are saying goodbye. Zara smiled through the shimmer of tears in her eyes. Yes, but you'll be fine. Her hand lingered on my cheek, and then she leaned forward, pressing a light kiss to my forehead. Goodbye, Lucian. Wait, I choked out, but she was already fading, light unraveling her like mist at dawn. I reached for her, but my fingers caught only air, and then I was awake. The first rays of dawn slipped through the window, pale and gold. My chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, though it felt as though something enormous had shifted inside me. The ache of the Zara-shaped hole in my chest was still there, but softer, manageable. For the first time in years, I didn't feel chained by her memory. I felt blessed by it. I sat up slowly, rubbing a hand over my face. Goodbye, Zara, I whispered. Regan's presence stirred, quiet and calm. She's proud of you. I know. Outside, the pack was already stirring, the faint hum of life filtering through the stone walls. I rose, pulling on a shirt, and stepped toward the window. The dawn stretched over Shadowvale, lighting the mountains in shades of rose and gold. Somewhere down the hall, Sarah was waking, probably chatting with her wolf about breakfast or the weather. A quiet smile tugged at my mouth. She really hadn't been the only one blessed by the moonlit spring. Ready to see where this path leads? Regan asked gently. I let out a slow breath, the weight of the night easing from my shoulders. Whatever came next, fate, choice, chaos, it didn't matter. For the first time in a long while, I was ready to meet it head-on. Serafina's Pove. I woke to sunlight spilling softly across my face and pooling on the pillow, warm and golden. Alina stirred inside me, her presence a low hum that felt alive beneath my skin, calm but electric. You feel that? She asked, voice smooth as silk against my thoughts. Yes, I smiled, stretching lazily. It feels incredible. She purred in quiet satisfaction. Our bond strengthens with every sunrise. It was true. I could feel it, the subtle strength in my limbs, the heightened awareness that shimmered at the edges of my senses. The air seemed clearer, sharper. I could feel Alina's heartbeat, steady and strong, moving in perfect rhythm with mine. When I sat up, I caught my reflection in the mirror across the room. My eyes looked brighter, faintly glinting with silver where before there'd only been cerulean, Alina's touch. The light faded soon after, but the euphoria lingered as I freshened up and got ready, wondering what today had in store for me. By the time I made it to the dining hall, the place was already buzzing with the morning rush. Long tables lined the space. Sunlight spilled through high-arched windows, illuminating everything. The air was rich with the smell of roasted coffee beans, warm bread, and crisp apples. It was easy to pick Sabrina out of the crowd. She was halfway through a plate piled high with eggs and toast, gesturing animatedly to a trio of Omegas who were clearly trying not to laugh at her dramatics. She spotted me at almost the same time, and her face lit up. "Sarah, over here!" More than a couple of heads turned in my direction at her outburst, but I didn't feel the need to shrink under their curious gazes. "There she is!" She beamed as I lowered myself into the empty seat beside her. "Hi," I smiled, nodding in greeting to the Omegas. "So," Sabrina nudged me, her eyes glinting mischievously, "you disappeared for a long while last night." Before I could come up with some sort of flimsy excuse, the low timbre of a familiar voice reached me from behind. "Morning, Sarah." Lucian. My pulse stuttered, then regained its rhythm as I turned. There he was, hair perfectly styled in his signature bun, sleeves rolled to his elbows, his usual composure softened by the warmth of the morning light. I thought of last night, of the revelations and confessions, and felt peace. After the ups and downs of our relationship, it felt like we'd reached a comfortable plateau, and we could just be. "Morning," I smiled softly. "Morning, Sabrina," Sabrina chimed sarcastically. "Morning, Hannah." She stretched her hand towards the Omega with a dark pixie cut and brown eyes. "Morning, Tegan." Blonde curls, blue eyes. "Morning, Jack." Brown hair, blue eyes. Lucian rolled his eyes, sliding into the seat across from me. "Morning, Sabrina," he said in a high-pitched voice, mimicking his sister. "Morning, Hannah." "Morning, Tegan." "Morning, Jack." The Omegas laughed, inclining their heads in respect, and it shocked me how normal it was for the Alpha and his sister to have breakfast with the lowest members of the pack. Lucian reached for the coffee pot, and when his reach fell short, I picked it up and passed it to him. "Thank you." His smile caught me off guard. It was so carefree, so relaxed. I lingered over his laid-back posture, observing the easy set of his shoulders and how he cradled the coffee cup almost lazily. His clear, peaceful gaze met mine. Something in his demeanor had shifted between last night and now. Well, Sabrina placed her elbows on the table and propped her chin on her hands. "What is this new energy between you two?" "Don't start," Lucian warned, but she only smirked. "So no one's going to explain exactly what happened last night?" Her smirk widened. "A little birdie saw you both by the moonlit spring. Another one saw you both returning late, suspiciously glowing." Lucian arched a brow. "Glowing?" "Her, not you," Sabrina said sweetly. "I bet you looked as broody as usual." "Ouch," he deadpanned, but was clearly fighting a smile. "You wound me," I chuckled, shaking my head. "You're both ridiculous." "Maybe," she said, "but seriously, you dipped in the moonlit spring." I exchanged a look with Lucian and remembered his warning about backlash, my brow furrowing with concern as I turned to Sabrina. "Is that okay?" "Of course it's okay," Sabrina gasped. "Did it work?" she asked eagerly. "How did you feel?" I grinned. "Amazing." And before I could stop myself, I added, "I grew claws." To some, it might not have sounded like much of an achievement, but it meant the world to me, and obviously to Sabrina too. She squealed loud enough to attract more attention and threw her arms around me. "Oh, Sarah, that's amazing." I laughed, accepting her embrace. "Thank you." She pulled back, but held onto my hand, squeezing tight. "I couldn't have done it without help," I said, glancing at Lucian, who was smiling at us softly. Lucian's training and the moon dew nectar, they made all the difference. He immediately shook his head. "You're giving me too much credit. You did the work, Sarah." I shrugged. "Maybe, but it helped having someone who believed I could." For a heartbeat, something unspoken passed between us, a quiet understanding neither of us needed to voice. Sabrina, predictably, didn't miss it. Okay, what is happening here? She demanded. This energy is way too wholesome for breakfast. I laughed, and at that moment, Alpha William slid into the seat beside her, his coffee in hand and a curious glint in his eye. Morning, everyone. Sabrina perked up. Willie, perfect timing. Things were just getting interesting. Lucian groaned. Can we please change the topic? But this one is so juicy, Sabrina whined. I laughed as one of the Omegas, Tegan, leaned forward, smiling shyly. Actually, Sarah, if you don't mind, I was hoping you could tell us a bit about how you won the LST. Yeah, Hannah chimed in. I heard rumors that you passed the Misty Woods because your team was filled with Omegas and you. William chuckled, leaning back in his chair as he stirred his coffee. Ah, the Misty Woods, he said with an amused glint in his eyes. I know a wolf or two that still chafe at its memory. He pointed his spoon at his brother. Bob is still convinced you rigged it on purpose to help OTS. Lucian sighed good-naturedly, rubbing the back of his neck. You know I didn't. William nodded. I know, he shrugged. I guess we're to blame for not being as clever as Sarah in finding the antidote to survive the snowfield. My cheeks warmed as my fingers toyed with the rim of my cup. A memory flickered. Alina's voice whispering directions in my head that night, guiding me to the heat berries through the darkness. But I kept that detail to myself. I knew she didn't mind my inner circle knowing of her existence, but I doubted she'd appreciate me sharing that information with the breakfast table. I leaned forward. Actually, Lucian, I've been meaning to ask. In the Misty Woods, it felt like you favored us, but in the snowfield, it felt like you were out to get us. Why? Lucian's expression shifted, his tone thoughtful, eyes distant with memory. The LST was something Zara and I first envisioned years ago. My chest tightened faintly at her name, but it quickly loosened when I noticed the ease with which Lucian spoke it, without the ache that used to shadow his voice. It sounded ideal in theory, he continued, an equal test of strength, strategy, and teamwork. His gaze turned introspective, but when it was implemented, I realized how flawed it was. Higher-ranked wolves dominated easily. For Omegas or those without wolves, it wasn't just a competition. It was a wall, a reminder of what they lacked. Sabrina frowned. That doesn't sound fair. It wasn't, Lucian said simply. The gap was too wide. Even with the later changes, more emphasis on intelligence and teamwork, the power imbalance persisted. It made victory nearly impossible for anyone from the OTS teams, so I had to even the playing field. He continued, I had to look differently at what strength really means. Through experimentation, we discovered something interesting. Omegas, while not as strong physically, have a higher resistance to certain elements. Their genes adapt faster to strain and toxicity. That resilience became the key to optimizing the first challenge, the Misty Forest. William nodded in begrudging admiration. Lucian inclined his head. I wanted the trials to measure endurance and adaptability, not just brute force. The forest tests instinct and clarity, qualities every wolf, ranked or not, should develop. Sabrina's face lit up. That's actually brilliant. William gave a low hum of approval. That's quite a philosophy, Lucian, he said, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. Most alphas wouldn't bother to look at things from that perspective. Lucian's lips quirked, but there was humility in his eyes. I can't take all the credit, he said simply. If it weren't for Sarah, I wouldn't have gotten here. I blinked, warmth creeping up my neck. Me? He nodded once, steady and sure. You, and others, of course, Maya, Jessica, the OTS teams, but you. His gaze lingered, holding mine. Watching you train, going over your numbers was inspiring. Technically, you should be weaker than an even and Omega, but you never trained like it. You made me look at things differently. You reminded me what strength looks like when it's not loud or obvious. My throat went tight. I didn't know what to say to that. Not when his voice carried so much sincere admiration it almost hurt to hear. Sabrina grinned, her gaze darting between us. That is literally so cute I could throw up. Lucian rolled his eyes, but his smile didn't fade. I'm serious, he said, still looking at me. For a long time, I thought leadership meant always having the answers. But lately, he exhaled slowly, his expression softening. Lately, I've realized it's about listening to the people who make you question your own. The quiet that followed wasn't awkward. It was warm, full, like everyone could feel the weight of what he meant. Something inside me shifted then, small but profound. Lucian's words made me realize that we weren't standing on Zara's legacy anymore. She'd laid the foundation, sure, but Lucian, and every trainer and trainee he'd encountered over the last 10 years had built something different, something living, beautifully evolving. And I was a part of that. And now it no longer felt like I was competing with Zara's memory. That was the peace I noticed in him, the lightness. Zara's shadow was gone, and when our gazes locked, there was gratitude in Lucian's eyes. I smiled. I think Zara would have been proud. He exhaled slowly, nodding. Yeah, I think she would. Sabrina wiped a pretend tear from her eye. Okay, this is officially too emotional for breakfast. Can someone pass me the honey before I cry into my coffee? That made everyone laugh, and the tension lifted instantly. The rest of breakfast passed with lighter topics, stories from past tournaments, pack gossip, and Sabrina's dramatic retelling of a prank gone wrong. As breakfast wound down, chairs scraped and laughter faded into the corridors. One by one, the others drifted off. Sabrina last, of course, tossing a mischievous wink over her shoulder as she left. Lucian and I didn't move. We stayed seated until the table between us was quiet, scattered with empty cups and sunlight. When we were the only two left on the table, he smiled at me. How do you feel? Good, I breathed. Really good. He nodded. Good enough to go for a run? I blinked. A what? He explained. The pack is going for a run this evening. My heart skipped. Like an actual pack run? He nodded, his grin widening. My hand pressed against my chest, and I asked in disbelief, You're inviting me to run with your pack? He chuckled. Yes, Sarah, I'm inviting you to run with my pack. My breath hitched. But you don't need to be able to shift to feel a pack bond, he preempted my protest. All you need to do is run. My mouth opened and closed, but I couldn't form words. I know this is an experience you've dreamed of for a long time, and it will be good for Alina too, Lucian added. What do you say? Alina stirred excitedly inside me, her energy surging in a dizzying rush. Yes, yes, yes! My grin was so wide my jaw ached. I'd love to. Serafina's Pove. The moon was rising, bright and full. It cast an otherworldly glow across the valley as the air pulsed with anticipation. I could hear wolves stirring, voices blending with excitement as the pack gathered on the broad plateau overlooking the forest below. The pack run. After years of watching from the shadows, isolated as my pack ran under the full moon, I couldn't believe I would finally be part of a pack run. My heart raced wildly. Breathe, Sarah, Alina murmured from within, her tone surprisingly serene considering what this meant for us. You're trembling like it's the snowfield all over again. I'm not trembling, I answered. Then, a second later, okay, maybe a little. She chuckled. They're your pack for tonight. Let yourself belong. That thought filled me with warmth, like a long hug. Sabrina appeared beside me, cheeks flushed from the cold, her hair braided in two sleek lines that made her look younger. She was practically vibrating. I can't believe you've never done this before, she said. This is the best part of being a wolf. I can imagine, I replied, smiling faintly. No, you can't, she countered, not unkindly. But you will. Trust me, when you hear the first howl rise, it's like... She flung her hands up, eyes sparkling. Like the moon itself is singing. I laughed softly. That sounds beautiful. It is. She glanced sideways at me, then bumped her shoulder against mine. And if you get scared or nervous, just stick close to me. Or if you prefer. She winked. Lucian. I pretended not to hear that last part. The pack was already forming a loose circle at the edge of the clearing. Over 200 wolves, men and women in simple clothes or nothing at all, their eyes gleaming in the moonlight. The hum of energy was intoxicating, wild, untamed, yet deeply connected. This wasn't a competition, or even a patrol. It was communion. A reminder that they were one body, one spirit. Lucian stood at the center, commanding attention without even trying. He was shirtless again, the black insignia of his alpha rank glinting faintly against his skin. His gaze found mine through the crowd, and my breath hitched. With a sleight of his head, he beckoned me to him. Ready? He asked quietly when I joined him. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure. As I'll ever be. His mouth curved, the slightest hint of a smile. You'll do fine. Stay close to me until you find your rhythm. Earlier, Sabrina had explained that, to accommodate those among the pack who didn't have wolves, everyone began the run in human form. As the pace intensified, those who could shifted into wolf form. Those remaining in human form could then ride astride the strongest wolves, ensuring no one was left behind. The fact that they were so accommodating, so mindful of others who were not as strong, it was mind-blowing. The pace can get intense. Lucian's tone was soft. But you're strong enough, Sarah. You can keep up. I nodded, rolling my shoulders in anticipation. There was no room for doubt tonight. Lucian believed in me so fiercely. I did myself a great disservice if I didn't do the same. He smiled and then stepped forward, lifting his head to address the pack. Instantly, the murmurs quieted. The wind itself seemed to pause. His voice carried easily over the plateau, his gaze sweeping across the crowd. Tonight we run, not as ranked or unranked, not as leaders or followers, but as one. We run for the bond that ties us. A ripple of energy moved through the wolves, like a collective heartbeat. Run free, he finished simply. And with that, the pack surged forward. At first, it was chaos, feet pounding against the earth, laughter and shouts echoing in the night. But soon, the chaos found rhythm. Those at the front slowed just enough for the rest to keep up, then sped up again as the first bodies began to shimmer and shift beneath the moonlight. It was mesmerizing. Bones reshaped, fur blossomed, eyes ignited gold and silver. One by one, wolves replaced humans, running side by side, some sleek and dark, others pale and ethereal. The sound of paws on earth was like thunder. I ran among them, back lungs burning, heart soaring, the forest blurred by in streaks of green and silver, moonlight filtering through the canopy above. Every breath tasted of pine and freedom. I'd never felt anything like it. But as the run stretched on, my legs began to ache. My human body could only push so far, even with Alina's strength. I slowed, panting, as the pack began to pull ahead. Sabrina's dark wolf glanced back at me and slowed, but before she could circle back, a shadow fell beside me. Lucian, he had shifted. His massive black wolf moved with effortless power. A ring of silver glowed around his navy eyes, but there was nothing predatory in them. Only warmth, recognition. He slowed beside me, lowering his head slightly, and for a moment I just stared. All the times I'd seen his wolf had been when he was saving my life. Now, in the wild chaos of the pack run, I could fully take in just how magnificent he was. And then, gently, his large head nudged my thigh. "He's asking you," Alina whispered inside me, voice hushed, "to ride." My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe as I gave a short, hesitant nod. Lucian crouched slightly, lowering his back in invitation. I hesitated only a second before stepping closer. My hand brushed through his fur, thick and warm beneath my fingers. Then I blinked, and a blur of golden fur flashed behind my lids. I stilled. "He never once invited you to run with his pack," Alina quietly reminded me. "Do not let his memory ruin this." She was right. Of course, she was right. So I slammed a door on all thoughts of golden fur and obsidian eyes and ravaging sparks of electricity. I climbed onto Lucian's back, legs gripping just behind his shoulders. The moment I settled, he took off, smooth, fast, unstoppable. Wind tore through my hair, cold and clean, as the forest roared past us in an indecipherable blur. Wild laughter tore out of me, half exhilaration, half disbelief. Lucian's stride was steady beneath me, each bound measured and strong. Just like his heartbeat, I could feel through his spine. "Hold tight," Alina said, her tone rich with awe. "You're flying." It did feel like flying, like I was soaring high above the clouds into a space where I felt beyond limitations. We caught up to the front of the pack within moments. The howls began, one, then another, rising like a wave until the entire valley echoed with sound. The sound hit something primal inside me. Tears blurred my vision before I realized I was crying. I wasn't even a true member of this pack, but the warmth that poured through me as their voices rose felt like a salve on every wound I'd carried. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like an outsider in a pack. I felt seen, included, home. Lucian slowed as the pack reached the clearing again. He tilted his head back and howled, a deep, resonant sound that sent shivers down my spine. Without thinking, I tilted my face to the sky, and a howl of my own ripped from the deepest depths within me. When the run finally ended, the wolves shifted back one by one, laughter and chatter filling the night air. Someone passed me a blanket, another handed me water. My muscles ached, but it was the good kind of ache, the kind that you earned. Lucian found me near the edge of the clearing, his hair damp with sweat, a shirt clinging to his chest. He was practically glowing. "You did well," he said softly. "I didn't do much," I admitted shyly. "You did all the running." He chuckled. "You kept up." I hesitated, looking out toward the forest where the moon still hung bright. "That was incredible, Lucian. I can't explain how it felt." He followed my gaze. "You don't need to." A pause. "You felt it. That's enough." "I'm glad you invited me," I said quietly. He took a step closer, his voice low. "Shadowvale might seem closed to the outside world, but our doors are open to those who understand what we stand for." His gaze held mine, open and honest. "You'll always have a place here, Sarah." I swallowed hard. "Thank you. That means more than you know." "It's not just the pack," he added softly. "My heart is also open to you." I froze. For a moment, the only sound between us was the soft rustle of leaves and the distant murmur of the pack. His confession wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, honest. He shook his head gently. "I'm not trying to change your mind or anything. I just needed you to know. I won't pressure you, but I also won't hide what I feel anymore." And then he stepped forward and drew me into his arms. It wasn't a fierce embrace. It was tender, steady, certain. My hands hovered for a moment before finding his back, holding him just as gently. "I'm grateful for you, Sarah," he murmured into my hair, "for what you've brought into my life." I exhaled shakily. The feeling's mutual. We stood like that for a while, just breathing. By the time we returned to the pack house, dawn was brushing pale light across the horizon. The pack was dispersing, yawning, laughing, some already planning breakfast. For them, it had been just another pack run. For me, it had been the experience of a lifetime. Serafina's Pove. The days that followed melted together in a haze of golden mornings, crisp air, and laughter that echoed between the mountains of Shadowvale. I'd walked nearly every path within the territory by now. The narrow bridge that crossed the misty ravine, the training yards where the scent of pine and iron lingered, even the quiet grove where the moonlit spring shimmered beneath its canopy of silver leaves. In just a few days, the place had begun to feel startlingly familiar. I'd learned the names of the pups who raced through the courtyard at dawn, their exhausted mothers calling after them. I'd shared tea with the Omegas who cooked for the whole pack, learning how they managed to feed 200 wolves seemingly effortlessly. I'd even sparred lightly with some of the younger warriors, and for once, I hadn't felt out of place in a pack. Too soon, it was time to leave. The morning of our departure was bittersweet. The courtyard was filled with farewells, pups waving, Omegas pressing small bundles of food into my hands, asking me to visit again. Sabrina clung to me hard. "I can't believe you're leaving already," she said, voice thick and eyes glassy. "I'll be back," I promised, squeezing her just as tight. "And you're welcome to visit anytime." She pulled back just enough to grin through her tears. "Oh, I'll visit. Maybe as a guest." She winked. "Or as your sister-in-law." "Sabrina," I groaned, laughing. "What? I'm just saying," she teased. "You and my Lucy looked way too cozy after that run." Lucian cleared his throat behind us, amusement dancing in his eyes. "Sabrina, try not to scare her off before she's even gone." "Oh, boo." She stuck her tongue out at him as she hugged me again. "Take care, Sarah," she said softly. "And don't forget, Shadowvale will always welcome you." Tears brimmed in my eyes. "I won't." When we finally set off, Lucian and I sat in companionable silence, the hum of the engine filling the space between us as we cut into the forest that guarded Shadowvale's borders. As we passed the last ridge, I turned to look back one more time. The valley stretched below us, bathed in light. It looked almost unreal. "Feels strange, doesn't it?" Lucian said quietly. "Yeah," I murmured. "Like waking up from a dream." He smiled faintly. "A good one, I hope." "The best," I admitted. His eyes softened. "If I could, I'd stay there with you forever." My heart thudded painfully. I understood what he meant. There was a longing beneath his words, not just for the peace of Shadowvale, but for something deeper. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. I just reached across and let my fingers brush his hand. He turned his palm upward, linking our fingers together. No words, no promises, no pressure. When we reached the private airfield beyond pack territory, the noon sun was high. The jet waited, sleek and silver, gleaming under the light. We landed at the private terminal at Van Nuys Airport 5 hours later, and the best present ever was waiting for me as I stepped down the air stairs. Mom, Kieran's puppy. As soon as I'd learned of Sarah's return schedule, I'd cleared my entire day. Daniel thought I had planned this as a surprise for him and his mother. And in part, I did, but the truth ran deeper. I needed to see her. After several days of wondering, of having to exert a gargantuan amount of willpower not to lift the powered, do not interfere or report unless she is in danger rule, a simple, indifferent "I'm back" text would have killed me. I needed to see her with my own eyes. That was the only way to soothe the constant stabbing pain in my chest. The private terminal carried the faint scent of jet fuel and steel. Out on the tarmac, the heat shimmered in the fading California light, the horizon blurring beneath the low amber sun. A soft breeze tugged at my sleeves as I took Daniel's hand. My son was practically vibrating with his uncontainable excitement, his dark hair falling into his eyes. "She's going to be so surprised," he said for the third time, grinning from ear to ear. I managed a smile, brushing his hair away from his eyes with my other hand. "Yeah, she will." But a knot of anxiety kept squeezing my chest, refusing to let go. What had happened in Shadowvale? The moment the silver jet rolled to a stop, Daniel bounced on his heels. I almost envied his innocence, pure joy untainted by guilt or regret. The door opened, and my lungs forgot how to perform the simple task of inhaling and expelling air. Sarah stepped out into the light, her hair swept by the wind, gorgeous eyes bright. Even from here I could feel it. The quiet hum of power around her was subtle but unmistakable. Something in her aura had shifted, grown. Lucian followed her down the steps, close enough that their shoulders nearly brushed. His expression was calm, composed, as always, but the look he gave her, that unmistakable warmth between them, twisted something sharp inside me. I swallowed hard. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea. Daniel, however, had the opposite sentiment. His hand slipped out of mine, and he tore across the tarmac, shouting "Mom," and tackled her in his hug. Her surprise quickly melted into delight, and she laughed, a bright, happy sound, wrapping her arms around him. Watching them was the best kind of déjà vu. Lucian hung back, giving them space. His eyes flicked to me as I approached with slow, firm steps. I nodded, the gesture clipped but civil. "Lucian, Kieran." His tone was even, but his eyes were assessing, his stance protective. The barbaric urge to tear him away from Sarah's side was a little terrifying. But as soon as Sarah looked at me, everything else faded, replaced by a surge of longing and regret that threatened to swallow me whole. In the space of a heartbeat, my eyes took in the expanse of her face. Her hair glinted almost white in the sunlight, the green in her eyes almost blinding. How could I have mistaken her for Celeste? How could I not have known that she was that little girl who'd rattled my world all those years ago? "Hi," she said simply. No smile, no warmth, just basic acknowledgement. My neck felt stiff as I nodded. "Welcome back." She gripped Daniel's hand in hers, her posture calm but guarded, too fucking similar to Lucian's. "You didn't have to pick me up." Her tone was distant, tight, as if it cost her energy to keep the words light. My teeth clenched hard enough to crack. "Daniel's idea," I said. "It wasn't." "He insisted." "He hadn't." Daniel tugged her hand, drawing her attention back to him. "Mom, guess what? I finished my training ahead of schedule." Sarah's eyes widened, a delighted laugh slipping out of her. "Already? That's incredible, baby." He beamed. "I told you I was going to come back to you soon." "You did." She leaned down and hugged him again. "Oh, I'm so proud of you." I forced myself to stay silent as she oohed and ahed over Daniel. But inside, a storm of questions churned. I wanted to ask her everything. What had she experienced that had fed her aura? Did Shadowvale change her? Did Lucian? But every question backed up, crowding my throat, each one too dangerous to voice. At some point, she glanced up and met my eyes briefly, calm, polite, unflinching, and then turned away again. Something inside me fractured. I'd resolved to win her back. I'd told myself I wouldn't give up, especially not after the truth I'd discovered. But standing there, watching her face light up with the smile she offered everyone but me, feeling the deafening hum of distance that seemed to have only grown wider, I had to wonder if I stood a chance in hell. Serafina's Pove. I kept my gaze on Daniel. It was safer that way. The one time I met Kieran's eyes, I felt that stupid fucking feeling, like a magnet dragged too close to its twin. I guess I should have realized that with Alina's increased strength, the so-called bond between me and him would yank harder. Faking indifference was harder than I thought. But damn it, I tried. Now that Lucian knew the truth between me and Kieran, the last thing I wanted to do was rub our relationship, for lack of a better word, in his face. After everything he'd done for me without expecting anything in return, the least I owed him was respect. So I forced myself to keep my attention firmly where it belonged, on my son. It was pretty easy. Daniel was so animated as he chattered happily about his training, complete with wild hand gestures and little sound effects. His enthusiasm was infectious. The joy I felt at the sight of him spread through me like wildfire. "I can't believe you learned grounding that quickly," I said, cupping his face in my hands. He puffed his chest proudly. "Grandpa said I was a natural. He said wolves who can focus like me make good leaders someday." I smiled. "You're going to be an amazing leader. There's no doubt about that." From the corner of my eye, I saw Kieran's fists clench. Before I could read too much into the tension radiating off him in waves, Daniel leaned in and pressed his lips to my ear. "Mom?" I lowered my voice. "Yes, baby." "Your energy feels different." His little brows furrowed as if searching for the right word. "Stronger." I exhaled. Of course he noticed. "It's Alina," I whispered for his ears only. "She's growing stronger." Daniel let out a loud gasp of delight before he remembered that Alina was supposed to be a secret. Sure, Lucian knew about her already, but Kieran didn't, and I was going to keep it that way. Daniel lowered his voice again. "That's awesome!" I laughed softly. "Yeah, it is. And it's perfect, so we can celebrate at dinner." "Dinner," I echoed. "Yeah!" His eyes sparkled as his voice rose so that everyone could hear. "Dad already made restaurant reservations. He said it's a special welcome home dinner." I turned to Kieran. "You did?" He shrugged, his gaze more intense than the nonchalant gesture. "I thought you'd like to spend some more time with Daniel." I pursed my lips. It was Daniel's idea to pick me up from the airport, and dinner was for Daniel? Did he think I was born yesterday? "It's just dinner," he added softly. Except nothing with Kieran was ever just anything. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to decline, to invent an excuse about unpacking or rest. But Daniel's excited face, those hopeful eyes, made resistance impossible. I turned to Lucian, who had stood quiet and watchful behind me all this time. Before I could form words, he smiled gently. "Go." I exhaled. "Thank you," I whispered, hoping he could see the overwhelming gratitude I felt. For everything. He stepped forward then and wrapped an arm around me in a loose embrace. I was hyper-aware of Kieran's gaze burning into my side, but I returned Lucian's hug. It lasted all of 5 seconds, but when he let go, my cheeks were lightly flushed. "I'll call you," he said. I nodded. And when I turned back to Kieran and Daniel, Kieran looked like he was having an aneurysm. "All right," I said softly. "Dinner it is." Daniel's cheer was instantaneous. "Yes!" Kieran's lips twitched, though his hands stayed clenched into fists. I'd expected the ride to be filled with Daniel's excited chatter, but as soon as we began moving, he leaned his head against the window and closed his eyes. I sincerely doubted he was sleeping. I sat with my hands folded tightly in my lap, trying not to feel the weight of Kieran's presence beside me. We drove facing the sunset. Pink and gold hues poured through the windshield. My mind drifted back to Shadowvale, the crisp air, the howls beneath the moon, the chill of the moonlit spring. That sense of belonging still lingered under my skin, pulsing in my veins. "Did you enjoy your time there?" Kieran asked suddenly. I turned to him, taken aback. "What?" "Shadowvale." His tone was casual, but his knuckles were pale where he gripped the wheel. "You seemed different when you stepped off the plane." I studied him carefully. It was peaceful, inspiring. He gave a stiff nod. "That's nice." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. When the car finally pulled to a stop, I blinked in surprise. The restaurant sat on a quiet stretch of beach. Strings of lanterns swayed above, their golden light flickering on the whitewashed walls. Curling vines framed the railings. Beyond, the ocean stretched, its waves pale under the dying sun. Recognition hit me like a cold slap. No, it couldn't be. My heart thudded hard against my ribs. This wasn't just any restaurant. It was the one I'd written about in my first book, The Sound of Midnight Waves. The dream date scene, where the heroine sat beneath strings of lanterns that swayed in the sea breeze while her love confessed everything he'd never dared to say before. The resemblance was uncanny. The angle of the patio, the curve of the railing, even the soft golden glow of the lights matched perfectly. What the hell? I glanced at Kieran, who was already unbuckling his seatbelt, expression unreadable. A dozen emotions tangled inside me: shock, confusion, something dangerously close to hope. Was this for real? Had he really read my book? What? He asked, his tone even, though something flickered behind his eyes. I shook my head. No. There was no way in hell. I was doing that thing again, reading too much into nothing. Never mind. I stepped out, and the sea breeze caught my hair, blowing wisps in my face. Daniel stirred in the back seat, rubbing his eyes and smiling sleepily as he took my hand and I helped him out. The three of us walked toward the glow of the lanterns, the evening slowly deepening around us. And though I tried to steady my heart, I couldn't help but wonder if this was coincidence or fate, or Kieran's way of rewriting a story that had already ended. A part of me was numb as a waiter led us through the restaurant, her soft-heeled steps clicking against the polished wood. Daniel's hand was warm in mine, his excitement bubbling. "This place is so pretty," he whispered, eyes darting to the lanterns, the flickering candles on every table, the endless view of the sea. "Yeah," I murmured. My voice sounded wrong even to my own ears, thin, fragile. "It is." But the moment we stepped onto the terrace, I knew. The layout, the scent of sea salt and vanilla candles, the faint music drifting from the small quartet tucked near the corner, all of it was too familiar, identical. I'd written that specific scene on the night of our first anniversary in a blur of foolish hope. Kieran hadn't been home, so I'd gone into Daniel's room, watching him sleep in his cot as I poured out every fierce wish, every hope onto the page. Intermittently, I glanced at the door, wishing with all my heart that my estranged husband would show up and pour out his heart, just like the hero in the novel. He hadn't, of course. He never did. And now, 9 years later, I was standing inside my own fiction, with the man who'd made sure that fantasy never became reality. Kieran had reserved a table at the terrace edge, the exact spot from the scene. My stomach twisted. Daniel grinned. "This doesn't look like the places you usually pick, Dad." Kieran glanced down at him, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "No?" Daniel shook his head. "You like places with dark walls and quiet music? This one feels different." Different. Yeah, that was one word for it. "What do you think of it?" He was talking to Daniel, but his gaze drifted to me. I avoided it as I sat, the chair creaking softly beneath me. My pulse hammered in my throat. "I like it," Daniel continued, looking between us. "It feels like we're on vacation." "I'm glad," Kieran said softly, still looking at me. That look, steady, weighted, searching. It was too much. Did he really know what this restaurant represented? Or was it all just a cruel coincidence? I busied myself with the napkin on my lap. "Mom, what do you think?" Daniel asked. I met Kieran's gaze for half a heartbeat before looking away. "It's lovely," I said, my voice cracking slightly at the end. Daniel didn't seem to notice. He was too busy studying the menu. Kieran leaned back slightly, eyes still on me. "The seafood here is supposed to be really good. You always liked—" "I don't," I interrupted quickly. "Not anymore." He blinked, surprised. "You don't?" "No." I traced the rim of my glass with my fingertip. "I got food poisoning from bad shrimp 4 years ago and swore off seafood, but you wouldn't know anything about that." I hadn't meant for the words to carry so much bite. Oh well. Daniel spoke up, blissfully unaware, or just good at ignoring the tension. "Can I get steak, Mom? Medium rare?" "You can get whatever you like," I said, my tone instantly lighter. He smiled, flagging down the waiter with an enthusiasm that made my chest ache. I envied his ease, his pure joy at something as simple as dinner by the sea. I wished I could slip into that innocence again, forget all the layered meanings twisting through this moment. But my gaze kept flicking back to Kieran, the way the sunset caught on his profile, the faint line between his brows, always there when he was holding something back. He looked older than I remembered, in a way that wasn't about age, but about the weight of years. For the umpteenth time, I wondered if he realized how cruel this was. Because this wasn't romantic. It wasn't a gesture of love or reconciliation. It was salt in an old wound, dressed up in candlelight and nostalgia, Kieran's Pove. Kieran's Pove. I knew I'd made a mistake the moment she refused the seafood. It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. Her tone wasn't accusatory, it was calm, factual. Beneath it lay a quiet, restrained edge that cut straight through me. I wanted to say something, anything, but nothing I could offer would change the truth embedded in her tone, that there were entire years of her life I knew nothing about, moments I'd forfeited. And this gesture, this echo of the dream she once wrote, was supposed to be my way of making things right. Except, watching her now across the candlelit table, calmly instructing the waiter to cancel the special seafood platter I'd pre-ordered, I realized just how far off the mark I was. All I'd done was remind her of a version of us that had never existed. Sarah wasn't the woman from the story, and I wasn't the man she imagined beside her. Daniel chattered between us, filling the silence with his boyish enthusiasm. He talked about his training and his instructors, and as he spoke, Sarah's tense expression gradually softened, the lines on her forehead smoothing as she listened. Then, somewhere between Daniel's story about almost being caught sneaking cookies during a strategy session and his impression of his grandfather, Sarah laughed, light, melodic, warm. The sound of it caught me off guard. Gods, I'd missed that sound. Was that wrong, to miss something that had never been yours? Because that was how I felt. I'd missed everything about her, the way she tilted her head towards you when she was paying attention, the way her fingers curled lightly when she was deep in thought, the spark that used to fill her eyes when she looked at me like I hung the moon. That spark was gone now. I'd ignored it till it fizzled out, replaced by icy indifference. And as I listened to her talk softly with Daniel, it hit me just how blind I had been for so long. How could I have not recognized her? How could I have let someone else come in and occupy the space I had carved for her when we met? After learning the truth, that she was that girl from all those years ago, I'd gone back and read her books properly. Not just skimmed them like I had when I first found out she was an author. I read them in depth. Every word, every metaphor, every heartbreak disguised as fiction. Her stories weren't about us, not exactly. But I could see us in the shadows of every page, the ghosts of our past woven into every line. The way her heroines loved, recklessly, passionately, without apology. The way her heroes always showed up, always said what I never did. Every time one of her characters whispered, "I choose you, I want you," it felt like a confession she'd buried in ink. And I'd missed it. I'd missed her. So I made this desperate, futile attempt. I built a moment from her memories, not her present. I tried to offer her the fantasy she'd once wanted, forgetting that she no longer needed fantasies. The Sarah before me had endured, suffered, healed, evolved, and I was still seeing her as the woman who once wrote me in metaphors. So instead of speaking and inevitably making things worse, I stayed quiet. I listened, half present, half adrift in a spiral of regret and remorse as Daniel told her about his new training schedule, how he'd beaten one of his mentors in a sparring exercise, how he was growing stronger. His eyes shone with pride, and Sarah's glowed with that fierce, tender affection that only she could give. She leaned forward as he spoke, utterly absorbed, her smile soft and warm. Her thumb swiped sauce from the corner of his mouth in a small, absent-minded gesture that made something tighten deep in my chest. It was absolutely fucking ridiculous to be jealous of my own son, but watching her look at him like that, like he was her entire world, made me ache in ways I didn't know how to name. The music from the quartet blended with the rhythmic hush of the waves. Lantern light flickered against the glass, and for a second, when she turned her head just so, the reflection caught in her eyes made them glow like sapphires. I wondered what she would do if I told her I loved her. 10 years, hell, 1 year ago, that was probably all she wanted. Not anymore. Not after everything I'd broken. When the meal ended, Daniel insisted on dessert, a chocolate tart that came dusted with gold flakes. He and Sarah shared it, laughing when the flakes stuck to his nose. Even though the gesture didn't have the effect I desired, I could see she was happy with Daniel. That had to be enough. Even though it felt like hot coals being stuffed down my throat, I had to start getting used to the idea of her happiness, without me. When we finally left the restaurant, the night air was cooler. The ocean roared gently beneath the terrace, the scent of salt and flowers following us out to the parking lot. Daniel fell asleep, fake or real at this point I couldn't tell. Halfway through the drive, his head lolling against the window, his breath steady. The silence in the car was still, like we were both holding our breaths. Sarah's gaze was fixed outside, the streetlights brushing gold across her features as we drove. Every now and then, I caught her faint smile reflected in the window when Daniel mumbled something in his sleep. When I pulled into her driveway, she finally turned to me. "Thank you for dinner," she said quietly. I let out a soft, bitter laugh. "For what? Dredging up bad memories about sushi?" That drew a small breath of laughter from her. Barely there, but real. "You know what they say. It's the thought that counts." Her eyes met mine, the longest eye contact we'd made all day. I hesitated, then reached into the glove compartment. My fingers brushed against the box I'd placed there earlier, and for a moment I almost reconsidered. But then I thought of all the times I hadn't said or done what I should have. All the moments I'd let pass in silence that had led us to this point, standing on opposite sides of a cavern that seemed to grow wider and wider every day. I couldn't do that again. I wanted to give you something." Before I could second guess any further, I handed her the box. Her brows furrowed slightly as she took it. "What's this?" Another attempt at redemption, very likely to be another miss. "Just open it." Serafina's Pove. My fingers hovered over the ribbon on the box for what seemed like an eternity before finally pulling it loose and lifting the lid. Inside, nestled against a pale velvet lining, was a necklace. A slender silver chain held a pendant shaped like a crescent moon. Fixed in its hollow center was a single pearly blue stone. Moonstone. My breath caught. It wasn't expensive looking. It wasn't meant to be. But the line came back to me, the one I'd woven at the end of The Sound of Midnight Waves. "You deserve the world," the hero told his love. "If I could, I would take a piece of the moon and hang it on a necklace for you." It was a sweet, sentimental line, but it always had a deeper meaning, one I never explained to anyone, not even Elaine. It was for me, for the girl who waited for her husband to come home and give her the world. And that's when I knew without a doubt, every detail from tonight, from the ocean view to the candles to the seat on the terrace, had been intentional. And this necklace was the final echo. I ran my thumb slowly over the smooth surface of the moonstone, my heart stuttering with each pass. "I had this made," Kieran said softly, his voice breaking into my reverie. "A piece of the moon on a necklace." I swallowed, trying to find my voice. "You read it, my book." "I did." He gave a small, self-effacing smile. Every word. I wanted to say something biting. I wanted to remind him that reading my books now wouldn't change what had happened. That this gift, no matter how thoughtful and sweet and heart-wrenching, couldn't rewrite the years we'd lost. But I couldn't. Because in that moment, with the warm amber glow of the dashboard light softening his features, I saw a flicker of the man I had once loved so fiercely, the man I used to imagine holding me beneath the same kind of moonlight that glinted off this pendant, and my heart forgot everything that came after. When he reached out a tentative hand, I didn't move away. "Can I?" he asked quietly. "Help you put it on?" My fingers tightened around the pendant. I should have said no. I should have made it clear that this, whatever this was, wasn't a second chance. But all I did was nod. He moved closer, the scent of him, fresh, faintly woody, so achingly familiar, curling through me like smoke. A shiver ran down my spine as his fingers brushed the back of my neck, and he fastened the clasp, the metal cool against my skin. And suddenly I wasn't sitting in a car. I was back at that bar, standing in front of the audience, while Kieran clasped Lillian's necklace around my neck. Except this was more. This wasn't someone else's treasure or an heirloom passed through generations. It was new, made for me, thought into being for me. The curve of silver, the subtle glow of the moonstone whispered of intention. It wasn't someone else's memory. It was mine. That realization hit with such force that I had to steady my breath. "There," Kieran said finally, his voice low as he dropped his hands. "It suits you." "Does it?" My words came out softer than I intended. His gaze met mine through the reflection in the window, his expression open, vulnerable. "You look beautiful." A part of me wanted to tear the necklace off, to shatter this fragile illusion before it took root. But another part, the foolish, trembling part that still craved the warmth of his arms around me, just sat there. It wasn't fair. It wasn't fucking fair. This, dinner, the necklace, him, was all I ever wanted. But why now? After I'd cut my losses and was doing my hardest to move on, a well of emotions rose in me, fierce and overwhelming. I don't know what I would have done in the next moment if Daniel hadn't stirred in the back seat. "Mom," he mumbled, breaking the fragile spell. "Are we home?" I exhaled shakily, forced a smile onto my face, and unbuckled my seatbelt before speaking. "Yes, baby, we're home." He yawned and sat up. "Good night, Dad. Thanks for dinner." Kieran turned and ruffled his hair affectionately. "Good night, bud. Sleep well." And then he turned to me and smiled, a small, wistful curve of his lips. "Good night, Sarah. Good night." My voice was barely above a whisper. "And thanks." When Daniel and I stepped into the house, I couldn't help but peek through the foyer window. I watched the headlights get smaller and smaller, and then he was gone. "Mom?" I turned to Daniel, my cheeks warm like I'd been caught doing something bad. His lips curved slightly. "That's a pretty necklace." I instinctively raised a hand to the necklace. "Thanks," I whispered. "It was a gift." "From Dad?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." He leaned forward, curiosity brightening his sleepy face. "And he got it from your book?" My mouth fell open. "You need to stop pretending to be asleep." Daniel laughed. "You'll only say what's on your mind if you think I can't hear." I shook my head, laughing softly as we walked into the house. "You're getting cheekier and cheekier by the day." He grinned. "So will you tell me about the book? Or can I read it?" I froze. My brain screamed absolutely not, as images of steamy scenes and themes far too mature for a 9-year-old flashed through my mind. Maybe not that one just yet," I said quickly. "It's a little advanced." He frowned. "But you always tell me stories." "Yes," I said, laughing nervously, "but those are different. This one's a grown-up story." He tilted his head, his eyes sparkling. "Like, with kissing?" My face went hot. "Among other things," I muttered. Daniel chuckled, far too pleased with himself. "Your face is red." "Okay, topic change," I said, crouching to his level. I met his gaze with exaggerated seriousness. "Because I have a surprise for you." That got his attention immediately. "A surprise?" I nodded, unable to stifle my grin. "Remember how I told you Alina was getting stronger?" He nodded. "Well, when I went visiting Lucian's pack, I shifted partially." Daniel's eyes widened to the size of saucers. "Really?" I nodded. "It was just my hands that formed into claws, and there was some fur, but—" "Oh, Mom." He threw his arms around my neck, and I wrapped my arms around him, squeezing tightly. "That's so exciting!" I laughed. "Yeah, it is." He pulled back slightly, his little brows scrunching up. "Did it hurt? My trainer said first transformations are very painful, even for young wolves. For adults who shift late, it could be," his frown deepened, agonizing. My chest warmed at his very adult-like concern. "Oh, baby." I cupped his face in my hands, using my thumb to smooth the crease between his brows. He exhaled. I hesitated, memories flickering, the fierce burning, Lucian's calm voice guiding me, the steady strength of his hand grounding me as the sensations rolled through. "It could have been," I admitted softly, "but Lucian helped me. He made sure it wasn't." Daniel nodded slowly. "Lucian's really strong." "He is. And kind," Daniel added, looking up at me with thoughtful eyes. "He's helped you a lot, hasn't he?" I smiled. "He has." There was a pause, long enough for me to notice the way Daniel's expression shifted, curiosity shadowed by something else. "Mom?" he said quietly. "Yes, love?" He hesitated, biting his lip. "Are you gonna choose Lucian?" The question hit like a pebble dropped into still water, small, but the ripples went deep. "Choose," I echoed. "Like as your mate," he clarified, his voice hesitant. "He's always there for you, and he's helped you a lot." I exhaled slowly, sitting down on the couch. "Daniel." He came to sit beside me, watching me with those earnest eyes that made it impossible to lie. I brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "Lucian is very dear to me. He's been an amazing friend and mentor, but right now I'm not looking for anything more than that." His mouth formed into an adorable little pout. "Why?" "Because," I said gently, "I need to focus on you, on us. You're turning 10 soon, remember? That's a big deal. After the heir ceremony, you'll start feeling your wolf more strongly, and I want to be ready. I want to work on myself, get stronger and faster so I can help when you shift." His face brightened immediately. "You will. I know you will, Mom." I laughed softly. "You think so?" "I know so," he said firmly. "You and Alina can do anything." Warmth bloomed in my chest. "You have a lot of faith in us. And you don't disappoint," he said simply. The fierce conviction in his tone made my throat tighten and my eyes sting with unshed tears. "Thank you," I whispered, pulling him into a hug. He wrapped his arms around me, his small body warm against mine. "Don't forget your promise," he said into my shoulder. "When I shift, we'll go running together." I smiled into his hair. I could never forget. I look forward to it with my whole heart. I felt his smile against my skin. We sat like that for a long while. The house hushed around us. In that quiet moment, with Daniel's heartbeat pressed against mine, I remembered what mattered most. Not the past, not the broken love I once mourned, but the future I was still building, one day at a time. Serafina's puff. The Lockwood Manor looked softer, less imposing than it had the last time I came. I expected to feel the same twist of anxiety that had accompanied me, but instead a stillness settled within me. Not comfort, but no longer discomfort either, a kind of tentative equilibrium. My mother greeted us at the entrance herself. "Serafina, darling," she exclaimed, clapping her hands excitedly. "Hello, Mother," I greeted, a little caught off guard by her bubbliness. She was wearing makeup today, and though I was surprised, I was glad for it. It meant that grief over my father and worry about Celeste hadn't outweighed the most important thing to her: appearances. "And Daniel, look at you. You've grown again, haven't you?" Daniel grinned, puffing his chest a little. Maybe just a little. "Oh, I'd say more than a little," she laughed, squeezing his cheeks. "Come in, both of you. Ethan's just finishing getting ready before Maya and her family arrive." The manor's great hall was as grand as ever, but it looked different than the last time we visited, with sunlight streaming through tall windows and painting the marble floors in shades of gold, and somehow I didn't feel quite as out of place as before. Maybe it was the happy occasion, or because, after everything I'd experienced since the last time I was here, I no longer felt haunted by the ghosts within these walls. Ethan appeared at the end of the grand staircase, straightening his collar as he descended. His face lit up at the sight of us. "You came." I nodded. "I promised Maya." My mother, too, had sent a message, hoping Daniel and I could be present at the formal meeting between the Lockwoods and Cartridges, but I'd come mainly for my best friend. Ethan nodded, relief flickering in his eyes. "I appreciate it. I'm sure Mom does too." He hesitated, then added, "It means a lot that you're here, Sarah. I know I've not always been the brother you deserved, but Ethan," I cut him off gently. "Today's not for confessions or apologies. It's for you and Maya. Don't ruin it by looking backward." For a moment, surprise softened his face, then understanding followed. "You're right." He exhaled, offering a faint smile. "Thank you." I mirrored his smile. The rumble of a car engine broke the moment. My mother's excited gasp echoed through the house. "That must be them!" I blinked in surprise when Ethan's smile faded and his eyes darted toward the door, anxiety tensing his jaw and tightening the muscles around his mouth. "You're not nervous, are you?" I teased. He cleared his throat and straightened his tie. "Of course not. I'm an alpha." "Uh-huh," I smirked. "Maya's pretty intimidating on her own. I wonder what her family is like." "Right?" he exhaled. I laughed, slapping his hand away from his tie. "You're fine. Maya loves you, and that's all that matters." He exhaled again, shoulders relaxing, and smiled down at me, less agitated. "Thank you, Sarah. Really. You're welcome." I took his hand and tugged him toward the entrance. "Now come on." We stepped out just as a sleek black car came to a stop in the front courtyard. Maya stepped out first, radiant as ever in a floral dress that swayed with the breeze. Her hair was styled in loose curls that framed a smile filled with irrepressible excitement. Her parents followed. Her mother, Sarah, a tall, warm-eyed woman with elegant poise, and her father, Devon, a broad-shouldered man with a neatly trimmed beard and an expression that suggested he didn't often smile. But the moment he stepped toward his wife and placed his hand on her waist, his gaze softened. "Devon! Sarah!" My mother greeted them cheerfully, as if they were old friends, stepping forward to clasp Sarah's hand. "It's wonderful to meet the parents who raised this remarkable woman." Devon Cartridge smiled politely, though his voice carried a roughness that hinted at disuse. She raised herself half the time, he admitted, so I only half claim her, especially when she makes trouble. Maya gasped. Dad! Sarah laughed softly. Oh, don't look so scandalized, darling, it's true. The light-hearted teasing was the perfect segue. I gently nudged Ethan. He stepped forward, his usually steady voice carrying a rare tremor as he faced Maya's parents. Mr. Cartridge, Mrs. Cartridge, he greeted, extending a hand. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. Devon's grip was firm and measured. Likewise, I was convinced there was no male on earth who could handle my firecracker of a daughter. Dad! Maya rolled her eyes, her voice half warning, half affectionate. Ethan chuckled. I take on that task with as much enthusiasm as I can muster. Devon's lips twitched. And you're a great man for it. Oh my gods. Maya groaned and turned to me, her face lighting up. Sarah! She threw her arms around me. Oh, I missed you so much. I hugged her tightly. I missed you too. She pulled back and cupped my cheek. You have a lot of dishing to do later. I laughed. Yes, Miss Cartridge. Then she grabbed my hand and turned to her parents. Here you go, the great Seraphina Blackthorn you've all been dying to meet. She leaned in and whispered conspiratorially. Even more so than my actual mate. I laughed softly as I greeted her parents. It's lovely to meet you. Her mother beamed. Oh, the pleasure is ours. We followed the trials closely. What you accomplished. She shook her head. Extraordinary. I flushed slightly. Thank you. I'm honored. Sarah's smile deepened, the kind that radiated genuine warmth. We've heard so much about you from Maya. You're practically a household name at this point. Devon even made us rewatch your final challenge twice just to study your composure under pressure. Devon huffed, looking only mildly embarrassed. I was impressed, he admitted. Most wolves can barely keep their heads straight in a high-stress confrontation, let alone under global scrutiny. You didn't just hold your own, you dominated. Maya laughed, leaning into Ethan's side as she shot her father a playful look. Wow, look at you, Dad. I've never seen you this talkative with anyone. You sure you're not a fanboy imposter? Devon feigned a scowl. Maybe if you'd come home more often, you'd see I have range. Laughter rippled through all of us, even my mother, who'd been watching the exchange with undisguised delight. I wrapped an arm around Daniel's shoulder and gently pushed him forward. This is my son, Daniel. Daniel straightened, every inch the confident young wolf he was growing to be. It's lovely to meet you, he said politely. Sarah held a hand to her chest. Oh, he's such a fine young man. My cheeks warmed. Thank you. The introductions stretched into easy conversation, laughter threading through the air, carrying through the manor's open halls like sunlight through glass. My mother, clearly in her element, took charge again, ushering everyone toward the doors with the grace of someone hosting a royal delegation. With time to spare before lunch, she insisted on giving the Cartridges a tour of the Lockwood Gardens. Roses lined the stone pathways, hedges trimmed into symmetrical art, and the air carried the faint sweetness of jasmine that reminded me a lot more of Celeste than I liked. As we walked, Mother shared stories from Ethan and my younger years, though her recollection of my childhood was always gentler than reality. Some tales reached so far back that even I struggled to remember them. Daniel listened with wide-eyed fascination, giggling whenever a story suggested I had once been clumsy or trouble-prone. That bench there, she said, gesturing toward a moss-dusted stone seat beneath an oak tree, was Ethan's favorite spot to brood. And over there, the pond, that's where he once fell in while trying to catch a frog. I smiled faintly. I think I remember that one. You were the one who screamed, Mother added, chuckling. You thought the frog was attacking him. Daniel giggled, eyes wide. Mom screamed? I sighed, laughing despite myself. I was 5. We continued down the path until we reached a small wooden nook tucked near the edge of the orchard. The sight of it made my steps falter. The little structure was weathered now, ivy climbing up one side, but I recognized it immediately. Grandpa and I built that together. Daniel said softly, my breath hitched. The air turned quiet. Even the breeze seemed to hush, carrying memories with it. Daniel's fingers tightened around mine, his eyes solemn. Grandpa would be happy today. His gaze moved between Ethan and Maya. He'd love that Uncle Ethan found his mate. The words lightened the sudden heaviness. Mother's eyes glistened, and Ethan swallowed hard before giving Daniel's shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Thank you, bud," he said, voice rough. The moment lingered, tender and fragile, until Devon cleared his throat. "Your son is very thoughtful," he said to me, his tone approving, "and remarkably well-mannered. You've raised him well." "Thank you," I said quietly. "He's my pride." Devon nodded. "We could use some of that discipline at home." He glanced at Maya. "Your nephews, well, let's just say they have too much of your energy." Maya huffed. "You say that like it's a bad thing." Her mother laughed. "They're a handful, but they're good boys. Just spirited." Before anyone could reply, a sudden commotion rose from the driveway, a dog barking wildly, followed by two high-pitched voices shouting over each other. "Speak of the little devils," Maya muttered. "I think that's—" "Maxwell," Devon finished, sounding both exasperated and resigned. We stepped out into the courtyard to see a second car parked on the gravel path. A tall man climbed out, handsome, if slightly disheveled, his shirt half untucked and his tie askew. In one arm, he carried a wriggling boy, and in the other, another identical one, both kicking wildly and trying to claw at each other. "He started it! Did not! Did too!" A massive golden retriever bounded out after them, tail wagging furiously. "That," Maya said, half resigned, half affectionate, "is my brother Maxwell and his twin hurricanes." "Serafina's Boys!" Maxwell barked, managing to set them both on the ground. "Apologize. Right now." The twins crossed their arms in unison, glaring at each other with matching stubborn scowls. "Now," he repeated, pinching the bridge of his nose. "I'm sorry," the one in the blue flannel said to his brother. "Sorry you're such a dumbass," Maya snorted. Devon shot her a reproachful look, and she pursed her lips, trying to stifle her smile. Sarah gave my mother an apologetic smile. "I'm so sorry, Margaret. They've been a little energetic lately." "A little?" Maya muttered under her breath. My mother chuckled good-naturedly. "Please don't worry. We've seen worse. Like you said, they're just spirited boys." "Spirited," Maxwell echoed dryly. "That's one word for it." He turned back to his sons. "Noah, Zach, come on. Greet everyone." The twins scowled in perfect harmony. Daniel, bless his heart, stepped forward before anyone could react. He squared his small shoulders, the same gentle composure in his eyes that had always made me proud. "Hi," he said kindly, extending his hand. "I'm Daniel." A few approving murmurs rose from the adults. Sarah smiled, my mother's eyes softened, and Devon gave a faint nod of approval. But instead of returning the greeting, the twins exchanged a defiant glance and turned away with an exaggerated huff. Daniel's hand faltered midair before he slowly pulled it back. His smile dimmed, but he didn't say a word. He simply stood there, quiet and dignified in a way that was far beyond his years. My chest tightened. I reached out for him and wrapped my arm around his shoulders. He looked up at me, and I gave him a small smile and a subtle shake of my head. "Don't take it personally." Maxwell, however, wasn't nearly as composed. His jaw tightened. "I've had just about enough," he snapped, grabbing each twin gently but firmly by the arm and steering them away from the group. The boys protested, whining all the way to the far end of the courtyard. An awkward quiet lingered in their absence. Maya gave an embarrassed little laugh, her cheeks flushed. "They weren't always like this," she said quickly, turning toward us. "They used to be sweet, actually, polite even. But ever since—" She hesitated, glancing at her brother's retreating figure. Her father filled the silence quietly. "Since their mother left." My mother's smile faded into something melancholic. "I'm sorry," she said. "That must have been difficult for them." Devon nodded, his gaze fixed on Maxwell and the boys in the distance. "A year ago, Willow, Maxwell's ex-wife, left to pursue her research abroad. She's an archaeologist. It was quite messy and generally painful." Maya sighed. "The boys adore her, and they don't understand why she had to go. So, they take it out on him." "Exactly," Sarah said softly. "And Max, well, he's trying. He took leave from his pack duties just to focus on the boys, but—" She trailed off with a helpless shrug. "Progress is slow." I glanced again at the scene near the edge of the courtyard. Maxwell was crouched in front of his sons, his voice low but firm, gesturing with his hands as he spoke. One of the twins, red flannel, was glaring at the ground, while the other, blue flannel, had his arms folded tightly over his chest, face turned away. Something about the boy's posture tugged at me. the defiance that came not from malice but from hurt. I understood that look too well. And when Blue Flannel yelled, "I hate you!" and took off down the path around the courtyard, before I even realized it, my feet were already moving. I followed the sound of rustling leaves around the corner of the courtyard, where a large maple spread its canopy over a carpet of fallen leaves. Blue Flannel sat beneath it, knees drawn up, stabbing a stick into the dirt. He didn't look up when I approached. "You planning to dig your way out?" I asked lightly. He startled, glancing up, then quickly turned his face away again. "Go away." I said, lowering myself to sit a few feet away from him. "You know, people usually say that when they actually want someone to stay." "I mean it," he muttered. "I'm afraid I can't do that," I said. "What if you freeze out here?" He gave me a sidelong look, unimpressed. "It's not cold." "Fair point," I said, leaning back on my hands and gazing up at the rustling canopy. "You know, you remind me a little of someone I know. The smug kid who tried to shake our hands?" I huffed, offended on my baby's behalf. "Daniel was being nice. He doesn't have a smug bone in his body. You owe him an apology." He shrugged, still turning the stick in the dirt. I rolled my eyes good-naturedly. "Anyway, that's not who I was talking about." "Who then?" "Me," I said softly. "I used to hide from my family too. Growing up, I was convinced my parents hated me." That made him glance up again, just barely. I smiled faintly. "When I was about your age, I thought everyone was better off without me, and it upset me. At some point, I just shut down. I thought that would make it hurt less." He frowned. "Did it?" I exhaled. "No. It just made me lonelier, and lately, I thought back to the dream I had, to what Paxton said about my father missing me when I was gone. I think maybe I might not have seen my parents' intentions as clearly as I thought." He picked at the stick in his hands, silent for a moment. "I'm not lonely," he said finally. "I have Zach and Dad." "But you miss your mom," I supplied gently. He didn't answer, but the way his jaw clenched was answer enough. "She read to us before bed," he mumbled. "She let us stay up late on weekends. She made all our favorite foods. Dad was always too busy working, and now he just tells us what to do and yells when we're bad." I nodded slowly. Sometimes parents don't realize that love looks different to kids. Your dad cares, and his way of showing it might not be perfect, but it's the only way he knows how. Noah's eyes flickered toward me. "Then why's he always mad?" "Because he's scared," I said softly, "of getting it wrong, of losing you too." His expression wavered, uncertainty creeping through his stubbornness. A quiet moment passed, filled only by the wind teasing the leaves above. Noah didn't speak again, but his brows were creased like he was thinking. Then, behind us, I heard the crunch of footsteps. Maxwell stopped a few paces away, hands shoved into his pockets, eyes uncertain. "I didn't mean for him to bother you," he said quietly. "He didn't," I said, rising to my feet. "We were just talking." Noah looked up at his father, and I saw the tension in Maxwell's shoulders soften just slightly. "Hey, bud," he said after a moment. "You okay?" Noah fidgeted. "Yeah." "You ready to come back?" A pause. Then a small nod. "I'll tell the dumbass sorry too." Maxwell exhaled in visible relief, his smile faint but genuine. "Go on then." Noah shot to his feet, and Maxwell ruffled his hair affectionately as he passed. He looked at me, gratitude flickering across his face. "I don't know what you said to him, but thank you." "I just listened," I said, and reminded him you're doing your best. His lips twitched ruefully. "My best doesn't always look great. Patience has never been one of my virtues." "It's not supposed to come easy," I said gently. "It's something you build like muscle, slowly and usually through a lot of frustration and pain." Speaking from experience, he huffed a quiet laugh. "You sound like a therapist." "Then you should probably listen," I teased. That drew laughter from him, the kind that carried exhaustion and relief in equal measure. He glanced down the path Noah took, his eyes soft. "You know, when they were born, I thought I'd have forever to get it right. But it feels like I blinked, and suddenly they're these complex creatures with all these feelings I don't know what to do with." There was a faint tremor in his voice, the same one I often heard in my own when I worried about Daniel. "Anger's just grief with armor on," I said quietly. "They're not trying to hurt you. They're trying not to hurt themselves." He nodded slowly, the words settling in. "Well, if you ever need a job as a live-in pup whisperer," I laughed, "I'll keep that in mind." Serafina's puff. Lunch went better than I'd expected. Shockingly so, actually. Once the twins' earlier chaos had settled, the atmosphere loosened. My mother and Sarah engaged in a gentle yet enthusiastic discussion about garden herbs, while Devon, Maxwell, and Ethan exchanged polite small talk about pack politics. Daniel, ever the little diplomat, tried his best to win the twins over, showing them how to fold napkins into wolf shapes and tossing in a playful imitation of a pup's howl that drew a few reluctant smirks. I took it as a good sign. By the time plates were cleared and the last of the pumpkin tarts disappeared, laughter had replaced the tension that had crept in with Maxwell and the twins' arrival. Maya stretched back in her chair, letting out a satisfied sigh. "That was divine, Mrs. L. Thank you." Smile lines spread in the corners of my mother's eyes as she smiled at Maya. "Thank you, dear. I'll give your compliments to the chef." As my mother ushered Devon and Sarah toward the sitting room for coffee, and Ethan leaned in to whisper something to Maxwell, Maya touched my arm lightly. "Come with me?" I blinked. "Where?" "Anywhere but here," she said with a grin. "I've already heard Ethan's childhood stories 1,000 times. I want to hear yours." The mischief and curiosity in her eyes were so familiar, so Maya, that it overshadowed my innate instinct to recoil whenever my childhood was mentioned. I hesitated for only a moment, glancing toward Daniel, who was busy helping my mother arrange teacups. He caught my look and gave me a little thumbs up before turning back to his task, and that tiny gesture made my heart swell. "All right," I said softly. "Come on." We slipped out of the dining hall and into the quieter east corridor. Afternoon light poured through tall windows, scattering honey gold patterns across the marble floors. "Gods," Maya breathed, eyes wide as she ran her hand along the wall, her head tilting back to take in the corridor's height. "This place is massive. I still can't believe you grew up here." I exhaled. "Yeah, sometimes neither than I." She gave me a knowing look, a tenderness in her eyes that bordered on pity. Was it hard, because of the whole no-wolf thing? My laughter wasn't so much bitter as resigned. It was whatever. Maya stepped closer and intertwined our fingers as we walked up the grand staircase to the second floor. I instinctively leaned into her, my favorite peppy golden retriever companion. "So," she began, her soft tone curious, "how did your trip to the famously elusive Shadowvale go?" My lips tugged up into a smile as we stepped onto the landing. "Amazing. They were so welcoming. I got to join their Blue Moon Festival and later their pack run." I turned to her, my hand rising. Also, I partially shifted. Her mouth opened, but I slapped my hand over it before she could let out the scream. The muffled sound vibrated against my palm as her eyes bulged like they were going to pop out of their sockets. I laughed softly. "It was just my fingers into claws and some fur," I clarified. "But yeah." Maya's eyes sparkled. She tried to say something, but my hand still stifled the sound. I arched a brow. "Promise you won't scream and spill my secret to the Lockwood Cartridge household?" Her chest heaving, she gave a grudging nod. When I dropped my hand, she gasped and threw her arms around me. "I can't fucking believe it," she yelled. She pulled back and took my hands in hers, staring at them as if they presently sprouted claws and fur. "That's amazing, monumental, fantastic." Ow! My eyes widened as I rubbed my shoulder where she'd just hit me. "What was that for?" "For going on a spiritual awakening or whatever the fuck and making me miss such a milestone in your life." I laughed, rolling my eyes. "I'm sorry?" She sniffed. "You have to make it up to me." I wrapped my arms around her. "That wasn't the last time. I fully intend to shift, and I promise you'll be there." "You hear that, Alina?" Maya poked a finger at my chest. "Don't you dare surface if I'm not around." Alina's amusement hummed through me. Maya cupped my cheeks. My beautiful caterpillar turned butterfly. My eyes watered. "I'm not there yet," she smiled. "But you're well on your way." "Yeah, I guess I am." Then she looped her arm through mine. "Now, show me the infamous Serafina Lockwood childhood lair." I laughed, pulling her along. The corridor still seemed small, but it somehow didn't feel as suffocating. Maya stopped to coo at Ethan's portrait, even taking a picture on her phone. When we reached my bedroom door, the earlier trepidation I felt with Paxton was nowhere to be found. It was exactly like the last time, except it looked like it had been recently cleaned. The scent of lemon cleaner mingled with lavender. Maya stepped inside and turned in a slow circle. This is so fucking cute. I rolled my eyes as she trailed her fingers over every surface, just like I'd done last time I was here. It's okay. It's adorable. All that's missing is a life-size cardboard cutout of your teenage crush. I snorted. She turned to me, her eyes narrowed. Serafina, is there a life-size cardboard cutout of Kieran in this room? My eyes widened. What the hell, no. She crossed her arms, head tilted as she regarded me carefully. My cheeks heated under her scrutiny. Maya, stop looking at me like that. Her lips twitched, and she pointed her thumb over her shoulder. There's a sketch pad in that bookshelf over there. I'm gonna open it. I frowned, my gaze following the direction she pointed to. It was a testament to her keen senses that she'd noticed the sketch pad wedged between two old textbooks, and when I noticed it too, a barrage of memories slammed into me. My eyes widened. No, don't. But Maya was already across the room, and before I could catch up to her, she had flipped the sketch pad open. They're just old doodles, Maya, I said, reaching for it. You don't need to. She sidestepped, holding the pad just out of reach. Her eyes lit up. Oh, what's this? She turned to me. Not a cardboard cutout, but somehow even better. My stomach twisted with an odd mixture of dread and nostalgia before the page came into focus. And then it did, and I forgot to breathe for a moment. The sketch was rough, drawn in pencil, faintly smudged from years of handling. The profile was turned slightly, as though he'd been caught unaware, because he had. Because I'd drawn it from memory, and my memories of Kieran included me watching from afar while he completely disregarded my existence. I don't know why I kept that, I said quickly, reaching for it. I should throw it away. Maya danced back out of reach, holding it to the light. Are you kidding? This is beautiful. You captured him like something entrancing, something you couldn't look away from. I hesitated, my throat tightening. Maybe that's because, back then, I couldn't. Her gaze softened. You loved him even then, didn't you? The words hovered in the space between us, heavy but gentle. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the portrait in her hands. Love's a complicated word, I murmured. She came to sit beside me, careful not to wrinkle the drawing. Complicated, maybe, but true? I gave a weak shrug. Don't you dare say it's whatever. I sighed. I turned my gaze toward the sketch, tracing the faint curve of pencil shading around Kieran's eyes. The curve of his jaw, the quiet intensity in his eyes, the barely there smile tugging at his lips. I was a writer, not an artist, but I remember feeling that words were inadequate, insufficient to capture what I wanted to express. Things that weren't tangible, his steadiness maybe, or the inescapable pull in his voice when he spoke, or the way the world seemed to slow and speed up at the same time when he so much as looked in my direction. Maya's voice broke the silence. What drew you to him first? Do you remember? I turned away, toward my desk. For a second I saw my younger self at that desk again, shorn hair tangled, sleeves smudged with charcoal, trying to draw a boy who made her feel something beyond loneliness. I don't remember, I said softly. I could be wrong, but I think that was the first time I ever lied outright to Maya. Because I remembered every single detail, Serafina's pose. At 13, back when I was considered a late bloomer, not a wolfless weirdo, I decided I was tired of waiting for my wolf to appear before I could join the others on the training field. Tired of watching from the sidelines while Ethan sparred with the older boys. Tired of being the alpha's daughter who couldn't shift yet. Oh, how I missed the days when yet was still fixed at the end of that sentence. Anyways, that morning, with the reckless conviction only a young teen could muster, I took the kitchen scissors and stood before my mirror. Hands trembling, I sawed through the thick waves of hair framing my face. Wheat blonde locks fell into the sink, one after another. The end result was disastrous, uneven, patchy. But from the right angle, and if I squinted, I almost looked like one of the boys. The 2 almonds on my chest posed no problem for me. That was good enough. My pulse pounded as I slipped into Ethan's old tunic, which I'd stolen from the laundry room and snuck through the eastern hedge. The distant clang of metal and barked orders called to me like a siren song. The training grounds were alive with noise and kicked up dust. Warriors moved in tight formation, their shadows sharp beneath the late morning sun. I hugged the fence line, crouched behind shrubs, but my curiosity burned too bright to keep me hidden. I'd barely taken 2 steps onto the field when a familiar voice thundered, "Serafina Lockwood!" My heart leapt into my throat. My father's silhouette cut across the yard, broad and formidable, his alpha aura enough to still every wolf within hearing range. Hi, father," I stammered, tugging the too large tunic straight. He stopped in front of me, expression murderous. "What in the goddess' name are you wearing?" "Clothes? Whose?" I hesitated. "Ethan's." Father closed his eyes briefly, his lips moving soundlessly, like he was asking the heavens for patience. "And your hair?" I ran a self-conscious hand through the short, uneven strands. "It's practical," I answered. "Less likely to get in the way when you're what?" His voice was low, dangerous. "When you're disobeying me?" "It's not disobedience," I insisted. "It's initiative. I just want to learn, Father. Everyone my age is already training." "Everyone your age who has a wolf," he cut in sharply. "You do not, and I will not put you in a position to get hurt." The words hit like stones to the chest. "I'm not helpless," I muttered through gritted teeth. His expression softened for a fraction of a second before hardening again. "You're not ready. You'll train when your wolf emerges, and not a second before." "I'm never going to be ready if you keep treating me like a useless, fragile little thing," he sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Enough, Serafina. We have important guests visiting later. Go to your room now." "Father, and stay there. You look unsightly. I don't want you embarrassing yourself and me further." I don't remember what I said after that, something defiant, I think, but I do remember the sting of tears as I turned and bolted from the field. I didn't stop running until I reached the forest. The air was cooler there, thick with the scent of damp leaves and earth and the sound of birdsong. I stumbled over roots and rocks, my breath coming out in hiccuped gasps, until finally I collapsed against the base of an old oak and burst into tears. I wasn't sure how long I cried for, long enough for the ache in my chest to dull into exhaustion, when a dry voice drifted down from above. "You know, if your plan was to scare off every creature in the forest, you're doing a great job." I blinked and looked up. A boy was sprawled along one of the branches, long legs dangling lazily, his head propped on one arm. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, catching on the strands of his dark brown hair and the faint sheen of sweat on his temple. He looked to be only a year or two older than me, but his confidence gave him the kind of presence that made the air seem to bend around him. My tears stopped instantly. "Who are you?" He tilted his head, regarding me with mild amusement. "Who are you?" "Answering a question with a question is rude. Don't you have manners?" He grinned. Bold attitude for someone who looks like they lost a fight with a pair of garden shears. Heat shot up my neck. "It's a style." "Uh-huh," he said, clearly unconvinced. "And what's a guy like you doing crying in the woods?" "I'm not a guy," I snapped, insulted, even though that had been the misrepresentation I was aiming for. He raised a brow, the smirk vanishing into mock surprise. "Oh, my mistake." Then, as if that amused him even more, he added, "That explains the crying." I glared. "You're an asshole." I've been called worse." He shifted to sit upright, legs swinging idly. "So, what's wrong?" I sniffled. "Nothing." He leaned down slightly, resting his forearm on his knee. "That didn't sound like nothing." I clenched my fists. "My father says I can't train because I don't have a wolf yet, but I'm not weak." The boy studied me for a long moment, and for the first time, there was no teasing in his gaze. "He's right, though. Training before your wolf awakens is dangerous." "You sound just like him," I muttered. He chuckled softly. "I doubt that. I just want to belong," I said, my voice small, "to feel like I'm not less." Something softened in his eyes. He jumped down from the branch with the effortless grace of someone whose body obeyed him without hesitation, landing a few feet away. "Your wolf will come when she's ready," he said. He was so tall, I had to crane my neck up. "Pushing too soon won't make her appear faster. It'll just make you frustrated." "I've been waiting forever." He smiled faintly. "Forever's not as long as it feels." I scowled. "Something tells me you don't know how it feels." "Maybe." His gaze turned distant for a moment, then he crouched down so we were eye level. "Your father wasn't trying to stop you from learning, you know. He was trying to protect you." "From what?" "From what happens when you get hurt before your wolf's there to help you heal." He plucked a leaf from the ground and twirled it between his fingers. "Trust me, You'll be grateful later." The acuity of his words, the sincerity in his tone, disarmed me. I stared at him, trying to make sense of him, the effortless confidence, the way he seemed so sure of things I barely understood. "You talk like an adult," I said. He smiled. "And you talk like a child who thinks the world is ending because she didn't get her way." I smacked his arm. "You're mean." "Ow," he gasped exaggeratedly. I rolled my eyes. "Oops." He froze, his eyes narrowing like he was trying to look through me. "Have we met before?" I wrinkled my nose. "I don't meet many assholes I would remember." That was a lie. I met a shit ton of assholes, just none as cute as him. He smirked, nodding. "You're right. Your haircut is something I would have had nightmares about." I was about to retort when his expression shifted suddenly. His head tilted, eyes distant, like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. "Duty calls," he murmured, standing. I frowned. "What?" That's when it hit me. He'd been mind-linked. He had his wolf. I don't know why, but the realization hurt worse than my father's scolding. My envy was raw, sharp, and almost childish in its ache. As he turned, my hand shot out and gripped his shirt. "Wait," I said quickly. "You didn't tell me your name." He hesitated, the corner of his mouth curving in a smile that was gone almost before it formed. "You'll find out soon enough." He took only a couple of steps before he stopped, turned slightly. "By the way, if your plan was to look like a boy, you failed. You're way too pretty." Then he was gone, vanishing into the trees so swiftly I barely saw him move. The silence he left behind felt strange. Empty. My cheeks were warm from his last statement, but the ache in my belly seemed to chew through me, overpowering all else. If my wolf had awakened, maybe I could have gone with him. Maybe I wouldn't have felt so small in comparison. I trudged home eventually, head bowed, the chopped ends of my hair sticking out in all directions. By evening, the manor was abuzz with preparations for the visiting Nightfang delegation. I'd been confined to my room so as not to embarrass my family, but once again, curiosity got the better of me, and I snuck down the stairs. I lingered near the entrance to the main hall, trying to catch a glimpse of the Nightfang Alpha and his heir. When I did, my breath caught. It was him. The boy from the woods. He stood beside his father, dressed in formal black with the Nightfang crest gleaming on his chest. The easy grin was gone, replaced by a polite composure that looked entirely too grown up. Kieran Blackthorn. The name rippled through the room like a low current, followed by murmurs of admiration. Celeste, draped in a ceremonial gown, her hair in perfect golden curls, stood beside him, radiant as ever. She was only 11, but was already the prettiest girl in the pack. The two of them together were the picture of a storybook future, the Blackthorn heir and the Lockwood princess. And I was the outcast, watching from afar, wishing I hadn't been so incredibly stupid and short-sighted as to cut my hair and have myself banished. But then Kieran's gaze flicked across the room and landed on me. Time seemed to come to a screeching halt as his eyes lit up with recognition, and he smiled, small, private, the kind of smile that didn't belong to the room or the people in it, only to me. And that was the moment I fell head over heels for Kieran Blackthorn. Seraphina's Pove. My mother's voice pulled me back to the present. "Seraphina, dear?" I blinked, the memory dissolving like mist. The sketchpad still lay open beside me, Kieran's penciled profile gazing toward the window. There was moisture dripping down my cheek. "Oh, sorry," I said quickly, brushing under my eyes before my mother could notice. Emotion still lingered from the memory, but I forced a steadier tone. "Just got lost in thought, remembering something." She stood at the doorway, her expression caught between fondness and worry. "Good memories, I hope." I held back a derisive snort and gave a noncommittal shrug. "Old ones." That was when I noticed that the space beside me was empty. Gods, how long was I zoned out for? "Maya?" I asked. "Off somewhere with her nephews," Mother said, shaking her head. "Those boys are full of energy. I do hope they don't exhaust her like they've done their poor father." I smiled faintly. "Maya can handle them." My mother hesitated before stepping closer, smoothing a hand over her immaculate skirt. "Are you all right, Sarah?" I shrugged, closing the sketchpad and locking the memory away. She studied me quietly for a moment, and I took the opportunity to do the same. Up close, I noticed what I hadn't at lunch, the faint shadows beneath her eyes, the lines that even her careful makeup couldn't quite conceal. "What about you?" I asked softly. Are you all right? Her hand paused mid-motion. Of course, she said quickly, but the tightness in her voice betrayed her. I reached out, touching her arm. Mother, she sighed. It's a topic I doubt you want to discuss. Try me. It's Celeste. The name had the same effect on me as pouring salt on a worm. Of course it was about Celeste. Isn't she living it up in Catherine's villa? I tried to keep my voice light, but the bitterness slipped through anyway. My mother winced. You make it sound like a vacation. Isn't it? I asked dryly. She's in a luxurious villa on the beach with endless ocean views and servants attending to her every whim. Mother exhaled slowly, glancing toward the window as if searching for calm. I've been calling her, she said, regularly, but she rarely answers, and when she does, she's distracted, distant. I hoped she'd be back by now, but... Her shoulders rose in a helpless shrug. I could imagine it, Celeste lounging on some sun-drenched veranda, replying to our mother with annoyed disinterest before cutting the call short. I offered to come visit, Mother added, but she rebuffed me, said she doesn't want to see any of you people. She sighed. She's still so upset. I held back a scoff. Judging by Celeste's track record, that was going to last another 10 years. I wasn't even going to bother denying the delight I felt at that. If I never saw her again, it would be too soon. But my mother was not me, and Celeste was not a thorn in her side. She actually adored the little she-devil more than she ever did me. Ethan's not happy about it, Mother continued. He says if she wants to alienate herself, we should let her, that I shouldn't lower myself to chase after her when she's being rude. But, her voice wavered, she's still my daughter, Sarah. I think it was a testament to my growth that my first instinct wasn't to give my mother a scathing reminder that I was her daughter too, and she never seemed to care as much about me as she did Celeste. I'm sorry, I forced out. She shook her head. It's not your fault. Her expression was earnest when she looked at me. None of this is your fault, Sarah. It felt like she was talking about more than Celeste's bitch fit, as if she were trying to apologize for years of conditioned blame. Like I'd told Ethan, I wasn't interested in rehashing painful memories today. I'd slipped with Kieran's memory, but wouldn't again. So I turned away. You should go regardless, I said. Go see her if you miss her that much. You could use that opportunity to see Catherine, too. You haven't seen her in a while, right? My mother was silent for a beat, and I figured she was thinking it over. After all, Celeste was the apple of her eye. Nobody else ever really measured. Actually, I'm going to stay, she surprised me by saying, at least until Daniel's heir ceremony. I turned back to her, unable to stop my brows from rising. That's more important? She looked slightly offended. Of course. Your father and I talked about that moment all the time. We couldn't wait. My lips pulled up slightly. I'm glad Daniel has grandparents who adore him so much. Her voice warmed. It's more than that. Being a part of Daniel's ceremony feels like redemption. I tilted my head. For what? Her eyes flicked away, then back to me, then away again. For not giving you a proper coming-of-age ceremony, she admitted quietly. It's something I've always regretted, Sarah. Her words and the honesty in her tone startled me. The coming-of-age ceremony wasn't unlike the heir ceremony, but it was held when one got their wolf. So naturally, I didn't have one. Celeste's was grand, the biggest party for a 12-year-old I'd ever experienced. I opened my mouth to respond, but my mother stood suddenly, straightening her posture as if afraid to linger in vulnerability. Come with me, she said. There's something I've been meaning to give you. She led me down the hall to the master bedroom, where the air still smelled faintly of my father's leather and amber scent. The curtains were drawn halfway, sunlight catching on the carved mirror and the delicate silver frame that held a photo of us, taken a long time ago, when I was a toddler, back when we fit the illusion of a perfect family. Mother crossed to her vanity, opening a drawer with deliberate care. When she turned back to me, she held a small satin box in both hands. I was saving this for your wedding, she said quietly. But that didn't. She trailed off, and I had no intention of helping her finish her train of thought. My wedding hadn't necessarily been a joyful event for presents. Anyways, she exhaled, I think Daniel's ceremony is as good a moment as any. I'm sorry it's belated. She opened the box, revealing a thin gold bracelet worn smooth over the years and polished to a soft glow. "It belonged to my mother," she explained. "She gave it to me when I married your father. I always meant for it to go to you." I stared at it for a long moment, struggling to reconcile my small hopeful warmth with suspicion. Was she giving it to me because Celeste wasn't around to receive it first? Because her engagement had fallen through? "Why now?" I asked. My mother shuffled her feet, her gaze fixed on everything but me, and the awkward display was the most shocking thing I'd seen all day. "What is it?" She hesitated, eyes flicking up to mine. "When you arrived earlier today," she said slowly, "Sylvia noticed something different about you." Alina perked up at the mention of my mother's wolf. "Your scent, it's changed, stronger. I wanted to ask, but..." A rueful smile ghosted over her lips. "I didn't want to push you too hard and ruin the fragile peace we've managed to build." For a heartbeat, neither of us spoke. Then she added softly, "When I saw you sitting in your old room just now, I thought, Goddess, how much I've missed you. I wanted to come in and just hold you. But then you looked up, and you seemed so far away and..." She sighed. "It reminded me of the distance between us, the one I let grow." My throat tightened. "And I know it's my fault," she whispered, her hand brushing mine. "I pushed you away. I wasn't there for you when you needed your mother. I'm so sorry, Sarah." I swallowed back a well of emotion. "How do I know you mean that? How am I sure you're not just giving me this because Celeste's no longer available?" She didn't look offended at my accusation. She simply tilted the bracelet toward me. The light caught the initials etched along the inner curve. T.M.S. Tabitha. Margaret. Serafina. She had it engraved before she gave it to me, and I did the same, my mother explained, 11 years ago. Tears blurred my vision, and I had to blink furiously to keep them at bay. This wasn't an afterthought. Like Kieran, this was my mother's way of trying to reach me again. Maybe I was softer than I thought. Maybe I was pathetic, or maybe I was just a sucker for jewelry. I smiled softly. "It's beautiful." Her eyes softened and she smiled then, not the polished hostess smile she wore for the cartridges, but something small and trembling. "I only wish I'd given it to you sooner. There are many things I wish I had done, and a lot more I wish I didn't do." Her words cracked something inside me. Without thinking, I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around her. For a moment she went still, then she held me back, tighter than I remembered her ever doing. Her perfume was the same as it had always been, white lilies and faint sandalwood, and beneath it something more primal, the soft hum of her wolf, calm and maternal. Alina purred against it. "Oh, I missed you, Sarah," my mother whispered. "I missed you too," I murmured against her shoulder. When she pulled back, her eyes were damp but shining. "I hope we can get closer," she said, brushing a hand along my cheek. "Bridge the gap. No more distance. No more enmity." I nodded, though I knew how fragile promises could be in our family. "I'd like that," I said softly. She smiled, fastening the bracelet around my wrist. The gold caught the late afternoon light, glinting like a promise that might, hopefully, hold Serafina's pove. By the time we got home, the sky had already bruised into twilight. The air was cool and smelled faintly of rain, one of those soft, in-between evenings when everything felt calm. Daniel trudged beside me, his hand warm in mine. He was quieter than usual, which wasn't entirely odd after a long day. But something about his silence tonight felt different. "Quite a day, huh?" I said as we stepped into the foyer. He gave a small shrug. "It was okay. Just okay?" He nodded, eyes fixed on his sneakers. "Yeah." I helped him out of his jacket and hung it on the rack. His shoulders slumped, and I noticed a faint scuff on the knee of his jeans, one that hadn't been there this morning. "Did you and the twins have fun?" I asked, trying for lightness. There was a pause. Then he mumbled, "They're fine." That tone, guarded, evasive, put me instantly on alert. Daniel was a talker. Vague answers weren't like him. I crouched so we were eye level. "Fine." He lifted his gaze reluctantly. "Yeah, they can be kinda annoying sometimes, though." I arched a brow. "Annoying how?" He hesitated, shifting from foot to foot, clearly weighing whether to tell me the truth. I recognized that look. It was the same one Kieran used to wear when he was younger, whenever he didn't want to admit something had gotten under his skin. Hell, he still had that look now. Finally, Daniel sighed, playing with the hem of his shirt. "Just, you know." They talk a lot, say things, and sometimes they act like they know everything. But it's fine. That wasn't the whole story. I could feel it. But the last thing I wanted was to make him feel like he had to tattle. Whatever happened with the twins, he clearly didn't want to make a fuss, and I didn't want to push. I trusted him enough to handle small storms on his own. After all, he'd handled worse. Look at me, easing off my worried mother-hen nature. I said. Twins can be a handful, and Noah and Zach are going through some things. You handled them pretty well today, though. I'm proud of you. That earned me a small smile. Yeah, I guess I'm lucky I don't have brothers like that. I laughed softly. You like being an only child, huh? He shrugged. I guess. He looked thoughtful for a moment, then said with an almost shy grin, but, you know, if you ever decided to have another baby, I wouldn't mind a sister. I blinked. A sister? Another baby? Yeah, sisters are nicer. Probably. I brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. That's not always true, you know. Sisters can be quite a handful, too. He tilted his head. Like Aunt Celeste? That made me laugh outright. Exactly like Aunt Celeste. Daniel laughed too, and the shadow that had hung over him seemed to lift a little. I placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Hey, I said softly. He looked at me expectantly, eyes bright. You know you can tell me anything, right? If something or someone is bothering you, you don't need to shoulder everything just because you're going to be alpha one day. His lips pressed together, then softened. I know, Mom. Good, I smiled. And even when you're officially heir, that doesn't mean you have to do everything by yourself. You've got me, always. His throat bobbed as he nodded, and for a moment he just looked at me, like he was studying my features, committing them to memory. Then he stepped forward and hugged me, arms tight around my waist. Thanks, Mom, he mumbled against my sweater. I held him close, my heart swelling. Anytime, my little alpha. He chuckled at the nickname, the sound muffled by my chest. Then he pulled back and grinned. I'm not afraid of them, you know. I nodded. I know, he shrugged. They're just jealous. A twinge of sadness went through me, remembering how Noah's voice trembled when he talked about his mom. I smiled softly, sadly. You might be right about that. The first thing Daniel did when he came home was move back into his own room. I'm going to be an alpha one day, he'd said, his seriousness tempered by how tightly he clutched Wolfie as I made his bed. I can't keep sleeping with my mommy. I'd laughed and kissed his forehead. Alpha or no, you'll always be my baby. Later that night, after I tucked him in and listened to his breathing even out, I slipped into my own room. I sat on the edge of my bed, and after months of neglect, I opened my laptop, its pale glow washing over me in the dark. My most recent chat with Elaine was still there, the last message she'd sent hovering like an unanswered thought. Hey, Sarah, just wanted to check in. Any thoughts about picking up the sequel again? No rush. I'm just curious where your head's at. I read and reread it over and over again. So much had happened after I got shot in the park. I'd promised myself I'd start after the LST, but then came the visit to Shadowvale, and now there was Daniel's ceremony to prepare for. Life just kept happening. Or maybe I was just looking for excuses. On a whim, I created a new blank document. I stared at it for a long time, and the cursor blinked back at me, steady and patient, like it knew I wasn't ready to fill the silence yet. With a frustrated huff, I closed the laptop. The click felt final, almost reproachful. Lying back against the pillows, I stared at the ceiling, where the faint moonlight shining through the curtains painted shifting patterns. My mind refused to settle. It jumped from Daniel's tight smile to my mother's bracelet, to Kieran's necklace. The ache of things unresolved lingered. This wasn't the time to create something new. Not when my life held so much uncertainty. Not when I was still piecing myself together. I reached for my laptop and opened it again. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I typed out a message to Elaine. Honestly, Elaine, my head's a mess right now. There's too much uncertainty in my life, and I don't think I can pour from an empty cup. Writing feels impossible when everything else is so unsettled. Her reply came almost instantly. Whenever you're ready, Sarah, the sequel can wait. You can't rush healing or inspiration. I exhaled a relieved laugh. Thank you, Elaine. You're too good to me. I don't deserve you. That is very correct. I laughed again, falling back on the bed. I stared at the ceiling again and wondered if I would ever reach a moment of clarity, when all the floating pieces of my life clicked into the perfect picture. "You will," Alina's voice stirred softly, her familiar warmth brushing through me. I exhaled, the tension in my chest easing just a little. "You think so?" I asked silently. Her presence hummed gently within me, steady and grounding. "I know so. Besides, you've faced worse storms than writer's block." A faint smile tugged at my lips. "Yeah," I whispered aloud. "I guess I have." Serafina's pove. The next morning, I took Daniel to be fitted for his ceremonial attire. For generations, the Blackthorn family had trusted a single tailor, Henry Whitlow, an elderly craftsman whose hands, though lined with age, still carried the precision of decades spent dressing Nightfang alphas. These days, Henry mostly sent his apprentice to handle fittings, but for this occasion, Kieran had insisted on having the old man himself oversee every stitch of Daniel's outfit. "It's tradition," Kieran had said when we spoke about it last night, his voice carrying a subtle stiffness and politeness. "Henry tailored my first ceremonial coat, and my father's. It's only right that he makes Daniel's too." Kieran had offered to take him, but Daniel insisted on going with me. I would have asked Kieran to come, but we'd had too many outings as a family, and I was still reeling from the last one. Henry's shop sat on a quiet street near the edge of the city. The narrow, ivy-draped building looked more like a storybook cottage than a workplace. The bell over the door chimed as we stepped in, releasing a faint whiff of pressed linen, old fabric, and the subtle tang of starch. Bolts of cloth lined the walls, from silver-gray wolf pelts to soft cottons and shimmering velvets. It smelled like tradition, like years of air ceremonies and pack banquets stitched into fabric. "Ah," came a warm, gravelly voice. "So this is the young Alpha Blackthorn." Henry emerged from behind a counter, stooped but steady, his white hair curling at the edges. His eyes, though clouded with age, held a spark that immediately brought a small smile to my face. Daniel straightened instinctively. "Hello, sir." Henry's grin deepened. Polite, too. What a fine young man. Then he looked at me with a kind smile, stretching his hand out. "Hello." I returned the smile and shook his hand. His grip was warm and firm, despite his age. "It's nice to meet you. I'm his mother, Serafina." He froze, mid-motion, eyes widening slightly. "Of course, Serafina Blackthorn, the LST champion?" I blinked. Yes." Then he laughed, shaking his head in disbelief. "My granddaughter adores you. Has your posters plastered all over her room." "I had posters?" Heat rose to my cheeks. "That's very kind of her." "She'll be thrilled to hear I met you," Henry said warmly. "You and young Daniel are welcome here anytime. My doors are always open." Daniel smiled proudly as though he was the one who had won the LST. "See, Mom? You're famous." I laughed softly, ruffling his hair. "Apparently." Henry gestured toward a stool. "Up you go, lad. Let's see what kind of alpha we're working with." As Daniel climbed onto the stool, Henry's apprentice, a quiet young man who looked barely older than 18, bustled about with pins and measuring tape. But Henry waved him off. "Not today, Walter. I'll handle this one myself. The boy deserves a personal touch." Walter nodded and retreated respectfully. I watched as Henry worked with surprising steadiness, looping the measuring tape around Daniel's shoulders and arms. "You're taller than your father was at your age," he mused. Daniel's eyes widened. "Really?" "Oh yes," Henry said with a twinkle. "Your father was a wiry little thing, always climbing where he shouldn't, tearing every seam I stitched within a week." I raised an eyebrow, half amused, half incredulous. "That doesn't sound like Kieran at all." Henry laughed. "Oh, it's true, Serafina. Mischievous as they come. Once he climbed onto my cutting table to chase a moth, knocked over an entire roll of silver-threaded silk. I nearly fainted. Daniel laughed so hard he nearly tipped off the stool. "Dad did that?" Henry winked. "More than once. He didn't start mellowing out until he met a special girl." My head tilted. "A special girl?" He nodded. I forget how old he was, definitely too young to know what love was. But instead of causing a ruckus, he would sit still on the stool and daydream all day about her golden locks and big, beautiful blue eyes. An ache, unbidden, thudded in my chest. I planned a lot of things for today. Hearing how smitten Kieran had been with Celeste when he was young was not on that list. But I smiled faintly, wrestling with the dull throb under my ribs. She must have made quite the impression. Henry nodded knowingly. "Indeed, Perhaps one day your young alpha here will meet someone like that, someone who steadies the fire inside him. Daniel wrinkled his nose. You mean like a girlfriend? Gross. Henry laughed heartily, and even I couldn't help it. I joined in. Not yet, pup, I said, tussling his hair. You've got plenty of time before that. I could only hope that when he eventually fell for someone, she would handle his heart carefully and spare him all the hurt I'd gone through. When the last measurements were taken and Henry noted the fabric choices in his leather-bound ledger, I reached for my bag. Thank you for taking the time, Henry. We appreciate it. But he lifted a hand. Hold on now. I'd like to make something for you, too. I blinked. For me? Yes, he said simply. Something tells me you'd wear it well. I hesitated. That's kind of you, but I'm no longer part of the Blackthorn family. His expression softened, his wrinkled face creasing like old parchment. And what does that have to do with anything? My wish to make something for you has nothing to do with which family you belong to. Daniel's eyes lit up. Please, Mom, you could match me. I hesitated, protest catching in my throat. Daniel's hopeful gaze pressed against me, softening my resistance, while Henry's determined stare left me no room for retreat. All right, Henry, I conceded. If you're sure. Quite sure, he said, already reaching for a measuring tape. Daniel might be the honoree, but nobody will be able to take their eyes off you. After we left Henry's shop, Daniel swung our joined hands as we walked down the street. Can we get lunch? I'm starving. Already? Breakfast was less than 2 hours ago, I teased. I burned calories sitting still, he said solemnly. I snorted. Is that so? He raised a brow, looking entirely too much like his father. Are you going to feed me or not? I laughed, ruffling his hair. Come on, cheeky. We ended up at a family restaurant tucked between two glass-front boutiques. It had bright booths, warm decor, and a faint hum of easy chatter that made everything feel comfortably ordinary. Daniel slid into the booth by the window, already launching into a detailed account of how cool Henry's measuring tools were and how he was definitely going to learn to sew someday, just to make Wolfie a cape. His energy was infectious, a bright spark that tugged a deep smile from me as I distractedly studied the menu, already knowing I'd end up ordering the same thing he would. Then, all at once, the tone of the street outside shifted. A sharp bark, a raised voice, then the distant wail of a frightened child broke through the restaurant's low hum. Chairs scraped and murmurs rose as a few diners glanced toward the windows. I frowned, a dart of unease tightening my chest as I glanced up, senses prickling. Is that? Daniel began, eyes wide. Yep, I exhaled, my stomach sinking at the sight outside. That looks like Maxwell and his twin hurricanes.